Okay, so our mission really, so we talk about first Detachment, who we are. So the best analogy I can use, you can read what's on the slide, but I kind of had this thought when we were getting started. I said, this same, if you go back to like the late 80s, early 90s, what was it called? It was called Air, just on Prime. Prime Video, you guys seen Air with Michael Jordan, the story of how signed with Nike, so pretty awesome story. So it actually kind of fits to this, which was about a year ago. But, I thought to myself, like the same kid in the back, basketball, backyard player could wear the exact same shoes Michael Jordan wore. I thought that was pretty cool. In the same way, that's how we look at the supplement market, is we design our products for professional athletes. So a lot of Justin's clients, what he did for years, me, one of them 20 years ago, I was a coach with him in the early 2000s. I was a competitor in powerlifting and bodybuilding. And I would get in all kinds of trouble with my mom because there would be a table this big with powder everywhere because all the stuff was crap on the market. So he would have us do our own formulation, and he's like, I hate supplement company. I don't want to do, or supplement market, I don't want to be in it. Fast forward to 2 years ago, and this gentleman by the name of Jeff, so he's retired Special Forces. He was the lucky one to convince Justin to get into the industry. Fast forward that, he became a little ill. I was running a telemedicine business at the time. He's doing better now, but his health is pretty bad. So my wife and I I know Justin for over 20 years and Jeff as well. So we partnered together, and that's kind of how we started First Detachment. So the final piece to our vision, though, is to make sure people just know the difference. So as long as they're educated on why I buy the product I buy it, why is it formulated the way it is, what does the study say, what's actually in the ingredients and things of that nature. I'll save ingredients for Justin. I can answer a lot of those questions, but he's the person behind all of our product formulation, and he's extremely passionate about that because he uses it himself and his clients use it and his name is on it. So it's more of a legacy thing and a passion thing for us. So as I go through education, this is really one of our big pillars. Is we focus a lot on free content, educational content. I'll briefly introduce you guys on, because again, it kind of speaks to our heartbeat. We have a poor strategy as a business if you're an investor. And the reason why is we do not plan to make money for quite a long time. And our strategy is a long-term strategy. So our core group that started it, we say we're all in, and we can give you examples offline. I won't bore you with all of what that means. But many of us are working multiple different side projects, 7 days of things, so we can put everything we have back into this. Because our strategy is long, meaning there's a lot of decent supplement companies, there's some not so good, but they're really, really good marketers, there's some that are decent, and there are some that are good. Let's call it what it is. But really what we focus on more is our high-level products and focusing on the education, which if you ever watch Shark Tank, you know, like educating the consumer is like one of the hardest strategies. But we believe that's the right thing to do, because this is a field that has given so much to us and we're really passionate about it. We want to make sure we can give back to the field, even if it takes 3 years, 5 years, whatever, to get to where we want to get. So just give you a couple examples, because that sounds like a really cool commercial I just gave you and a bunch of lip service. But just some examples of what we do. First is our podcast, so 1D Talks. We actually need to update that. We probably have about another 20 like super impressive guests we have on there. It's all free. We fund all of the things to have the guest on, all of our recording. We have a team that cuts reels, pulls the content. You can find it on any of your audio platforms and YouTube, so that's something we're really proud of. We have a lot of fun with that. We also got some pretty exciting events, like at the Swiss conference. We're gonna have like a round table, a bunch of coaches are gonna be on it, and we'll kind of stream that live. We do live Q&As, we just started doing that recently. And we're gonna do some fundraising things for our community pretty soon, which we're pretty excited about too, through this platform. Next up is some of our articles. So there's an article on like GVAs, and you guys may notice where that picture was taken in the background there, with training volume. So this is actually from Tom Shepard. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Tom Shepard. So he's a coach for Elite FTS. They'll be moving to the US in the fall. Good friend of ours. So that's one of the things we just love about this industry is we have several coaches. I know you guys have some coaches here too. And I know Joe and I just finished a Strongman ebook, and we have some articles that we're publishing too together. Just trying to give back to the community through that. So these are all free articles from experts across the industry, and message us, comment. You guys see my contact info. Hey, can you guys look up an article on this? I'd be happy to. So we love that stuff. A couple other articles. So this is an actual research article done by someone in our team. It's a master's in dietetics. So everything's cited in there for all of our ingredients. So if you're ever like, yeah, that sounds like, a really good commercial and buzz line, We put all of our stuff on our website with links to the studies, research, where you can find it, why. If you're interested, if you're like, yeah, don't care, just want to take it and feel great, awesome, that works too. You may have heard about sucralose. That's an article we did on sucralose, a recent sucralose study. Because Justin's not here, ask him what he thinks about sucralose. Just trust me, it'll be fun. He'll lose his mind. So, all right. Lastly, these are some of the paid things. But again, we try to price these extremely reasonable. Joe and I just finished our Strongman ebook there. It's about 85 pages. We're really excited about that. Right now, it's on joemiller1d.com, but we're going to have it on First Detachment in the next week or so. And then these are all Justin's ebooks. These are two. There's ebooks and templates. So if you were like, hey, I really don't want to make the investment in a coach, you can purchase one of these templates. And outside of his individual adjustments, everything's built in there. Some really pretty detailed formulas and things that spit out your diet plans and a lot of education knowledge. So those are things we're really proud of that give people access to a lot of great knowledge. You guys may know who this guy is. So Dave's a good friend of ours. Justin's known him since the early 2000s. So we're on Table Talks pretty regularly. We kind of share guests. And then we're also one of their main sponsors. We're really proud of that because if you guys don't know Dave, Dave's a no bullcrap type guy. So he was very adamant that he doesn't want a supplement company to sponsor on his podcast until Justin called him. He's like, well, you're probably like the only guy. And actually, it's pretty cool. He did a really nice video about why he changed his team because of Justin to do this with us. So excited for that. And actually, Justin will be on in about 3 weeks. He's going to be releasing a novel product that has never been released in the U.S., but I can't say what it is because it's not on the shelves yet. So I don't want to steal his thunder. Swiss conference I talked about it, so we're also really proud. So again, this is kind of my example. We put our money where our mouth is. So we're one of the main sponsors of Swiss because we believe in education, giving back to the industry. So anything you ever purchase from us, or if you do business with us, or even subscribe or follow us, like we're using those resources to give back to the community. So I couldn't find my 2023 one, so I failed there. But you may see this big ugly guy right here. So this was him from 2022, and he'll also be speaking in 2023. If you haven't never been there, I would definitely check it out on our website. A lot of great stuff. Anybody ever been to Swiss? No? No Swiss people? Okay. Cool. Lastly, just a couple spots you guys can find us at. And then just high level, we have other supplements today. Actually, can one of you guys grab that box for me maybe, Dylan? If you guys wouldn't mind bringing it over here. So these are some of our core products. Field rations, our intra-workout, our fat burner, WTF, our pre-workout. Hit the rack is a sleep formulation. Suppressor, we'll probably get into a little bit when Justin gets here. Show the GDA. QRF is liver, so liver support. So again, if someone's maybe kind of twofold, if you're strength training and eating a lot of food, you can put some strain in your liver that way, so it'll help kind of the liver function more efficiently. If someone happens to be using any compounds that put stress on the liver, this will help offset that. So again, we're not making false medical claims here, but you will see positive results in your blood work. So we'll take some stress out there. And then similar with the renal reset, same thing, and how it's formulated. You guys can look at the ingredients when we have a break. Lastly, a couple things before we jump into the kind of next stage of content. If you guys want, you can scan this code. We'll give you guys a minute, but we're going to be raffling off our OOP stack and our total shred stack. So we have our field rations, fat burner, and WTF, as well as QRF suppressor, Flomax, and renal reset. All right, so Cramp Away, our product Cramp Away is a great product. Here's the full transparency. So when it was founded, love the guy who started it, poorly marketed. So you will see on the bottle it talks about cramps in bodybuilding or powerlifting. What causes those cramps is similar to menstrual cramps and mood swings. And so he originally marketed for women and menstrual after mood swings, which you can imagine we probably get very little of that customer base to our site. So we didn't brand it very well, so on our site we've changed that, but if you use that, it'll definitely help tremendously as far as, so don't read and think you're gonna turn into a woman overnight or anything like that. We're not doing that to you. The minerals and vitamins and things in there to support you will help with the anti-cramp formulation that Justin's used with his clients for 20 plus years. So we're talking IFBB guys all the way to like a local bodybuilding show. So it works fantastic, and Joe, I'll get you another one. All right, so peptides. So again, I'm just gonna go kind of high level from this. It's a little different. We don't sell peptides. I just found it as a nice value add for me to chime in. So if you have questions, message me after, or we can stick around after and I'll do my best. But this will be kind of high level. I'll just buzz through it. Maybe it'll click a few things and just add some value to your just general knowledge if you're seeing some of these things out there in the marketplace. So first, high level, what's a peptide? Pharma versus research grade, what's the difference? GHRP versus GHRH, anyone ever heard those terms before? Okay, it's quite a few people. Metformin, semaglutides, we'll talk a little bit about GDAs as well. So give you guys, again, kind of a high level. This is from a clinical application, but just high level to get you kind of thinking about what are these different methods or things that are out there. So you guys can see here, these are just definitions of what a peptide is. A molecule that contains 3 or more amino acids. Think of like a peptide as like, picture there's cells in the body that have multiple different locks. And what these peptides actually do, they're starting to formulate them to where they can go right to a specific type of tissue or a specific issue and kind of unlock that issue and unpack some positive things there. So it's really exciting what's going on. And there's 2 primary types, human grade, research grade. Who's heard of research grade? Okay. So we're going to talk about that. If you like research grade, I'm not trying to offend you or anything. I'm just trying to raise awareness about some differences here, because there's some pretty big ones. So human grade, so this is something I'm more familiar with, so you work in a clinical setting. One, just the raw materials are human grade. It's highly regulated, so there's many governing bodies as far as that goes to ensure the sterility, stability, dosage, and potency. GMP certified facility, so that's like the difference between like my bro making his bathtub and like a chemical system and like a suit and a deal, right? And I may or may not have made stuff in my bathtub in the 2000s, but I digress. And I may or may not have used my oven a few times. Cleaning protocols. No residue, no LPS. So you're like, what the hell is LPS? Who cares about that? Well, LPS, lipopolysaccharide, LPS is what they inject in mice to give them a fever in studies. So if you don't believe me, because I'm not a researcher, you can look up Andrew Huberman, LPS. So he talks openly about it on many podcasts. The problem is so in these situations, they actually have a specific method for cleaning LPS, okay? So when we switch over to research grade, again, high level, but jump down to the bottom, just one thing to be cautious of when you're looking at that. There has been a high amount of residue of LPS found in a lot of the research grade compounds. If you source somewhere and it doesn't, I'm surprised, because the majority that I ran into did have LPS still, because it's a very expensive process to clean LPS. So as you go through, again, it's more of an animal grade, non-regulation, non-GMP. There's been some testing. So again, if you look at like the clinical folks that, they come here from Europe and they do this big conference. If you ever look up like A4M, it's a really well-known kind of thought leaders in this whole like regenerative medicine thing. So I did a 2-year fellowship with A4M, and one of the things that was interesting was seeing the research across the US, about 60 to 70% potency of what's actually in it. And then you can see down there just a little bit of the carrier oils that can like spike your C-reactive protein, stress on the system, heart, and so on. So just a little thing to think about when you're kind of making decisions on if you are using some of these products. GHRH, GHRP, so just high level. I kind of like this visual. So there's growth hormone releasing hormones, so you can kind of see the differences in signaling. There's basically 2 different ones. That one goes like a ghrelin pathway, and one's your growth hormone releasing hormone pathway. So I'll walk through kind of some of these different compounds, but the key why that's important, whether it's research or it's clinical use, is that you're not using 2 of the same. In other words, a growth hormone releasing hormone and a growth hormone releasing peptide are 2 different mechanisms of action. So if you're taking both of the same, you're probably not getting anything out of it. That's where a lot of people make a mistake. Or they think more is better, like an HGH. But the way peptides work is they actually turn on the signaling in your body to produce the maximum amount of growth hormone that your body can produce. So one of the safety efficacies of it, it's actually really nice, there's 80-year-old women that are using it, is because it's self-regulating. So they can't overproduce, if that's a concern. If it's not, then, use growth hormone. So here's just a couple of high-level things again. Samorelin, tesamorelin, have you guys ever heard of this? So you can see a couple of things it does there. So stimulating our pituitary, a couple of different talking points here as far as how it works with frequency and administration. So one of the things with peptides, and it's kind of similar to insulin, and Justin will take those questions on in a little bit, if you have like insulin naturally or subcutaneous or whatever the case is with insulin, but they fight over the same receptor site, so a lot of times people will either do like an AM and PM or do a PM administration. So you can kind of do all at once, or you can do AM, PM. It really just depends on the person's goals, their dietary habits. Some people use like growth hormone releasing hormone, fasted cardio, blood sugar is a little bit lower, and seems to give a little bit of energy. And it's very minute, but it does spike the ability to burn a little bit more fat as a fuel source. You guys may have heard, anybody hear of these? Butamorin, Upmarelin, CJC, a lot of head nuts. Pretty familiar with those. So again, you can kind of see overall, just shows you a little bit of the active half-life times, because I think this is, again, it's another key thing to think about. What I saw in a clinical setting was a lot of people coming to us for research compounds that caused some issues, or they were just simply wasting their money because of the timing of when they did it. So that's kind of where these graphs just kind of tend to help shine a light on how long is this thing I'm using active and when should I use it again. Butamorin, a lot of people, anybody ever get pretty hungry off of that? Right, so it works with the ghrelin receptors to make you hungry, so that's why a lot of times they'll suggest like a PM so that you don't eat your house unless you wake up in the middle of the night. And generally you can see there are some research that indicates certain peptides will create essentially the way that key and that locks into that hole, if you will get a little sticky and kind of not work as effective as it will. So there's sometimes like a reason for a holiday. So you're doing 2-3 months and a month not using things of that nature. Similar with Butamorin, usually it's rotating like 1 to 3 months. Blood pressure, we'll get into that in a little bit, but there's some blood pressure things there to consider, and blood glucose levels. So, all right, so we're going to jump into recovery, gut, and GDAs. Anybody ever hear of BPC? People have a success story for BPC. Any success stories out there? Anyone want to share? You want to share yours?
Yeah, it helped my lower back pain like crazy.
Did you use oral or injectable? Okay. Anybody else?
Scratched my cornea a year and a half ago and it just never healed right. And then got on BPC and within 10 days it was like it never happened a year later.
Yeah. So it's, and I'm guessing oral?
That was injectable.
It was, but not localized, obviously.
No.
I figured I just wanted to clarify that. So the reason why I asked that though is there's an oral application and there's injectable, but there tends from like a prescriber philosophy, there tends to be more of a higher likelihood of success if it's localized, like to the area that's injured. I don't know, my wife had, she hates needles, would never inject, but used an oral form, and she had knee surgery, and it was like magic, how quick she recovered. And also the oral helps more with the gut health and repairing the microbiome of the gut. So yeah. If you're using it, it's working, I'll just move on. So I'm kind of pretty familiar with that. Metformin, anybody familiar with metformin? So a couple things that Justin will get into a little bit different, but why I introduce this is talking about a couple things with our product suppressor and metformin, how they work in different pathways. So there's some high-level pros and cons to metformin, and then there's also ways that either yourself or someone in like a family member, so I have a few family members, do not exercise, they're obese, they struggle, they're type 2 diabetic, or about to be, and they use our product suppressor as well as metformin prescribed by a physician. Because they work on 2 different pathways, it just helps optimize their blood sugar levels all together. So a couple of quick things I'll mention here. What's interesting about metformin is it does not increase insulin secretion, only like the sensitivity of the insulin and the receptors. And has anybody ever had any gut distress using metformin? Maybe? A few? I know I do. I know I've had a lot of patients say that. So the reason I bring it up is anybody familiar with like a topical application of metformin? No? Not many metformin users, I take it. So there is a topical application which converts at about a 10%, and that greatly decreases like any gut issues. So something just to be aware of there. How about semaglutide? Can you use semaglutide? What do you guys think?
Yeah, it incredibly reduced my A1C.
Okay.
A ton, yeah.
Awesome. Any side effects from it?
Not really, no. I mean, just
Nausea.
suppress my appetite a lot.
Yeah, so it works, obviously you kind of see the breakdown here. It works through a couple different pathways. One of the key things that we've seen in the clinical application is if you can take an anti-nausea medication with it, or you can spread out the frequency of dosages, obviously under, recommended under a physician's approval there, but it's fantastic product. One thing people get kind of scared about is 10 to 20% body weight loss, and there was a study that came out, and if you ask Justin about his thoughts on if people should read studies or not, he's got a pretty interesting philosophy about that. But 7% of it was lean body mass. Everyone freaked out, saying, well, almost half of it was lean body mass. Well, two things that did not make the headlines in those studies was, one, that the placebo group was over 50% lean body mass loss on that same protocol. The second is that these were sedentary people, were not exercising, they were already taking in a lower amount of protein in their diet, probably not enough, they're probably deficient in a lot of micronutrients, things of that nature. So are you gonna potentially lose muscle if you're grossly depleted? Yes, but is it gonna be this dramatic with the type of training you're doing? Probably not. All right, so this last thing here on this topic, just talking about suppressor. As I mentioned, Justin's really the mastermind behind the formulation, so I have him go through the more granular level of these things. But the way suppressor works is through a IGF-1 pathway, so it's through a cascade of events in the body that's separate than metformin, so it works different. And there's some, as Justin will talk about, probably 20 years, a few thousand clients, some anecdotal evidence around it being equivalent to about a gram of metformin on results as far as all your blood sugar markers and such. Has anybody tried our metformin or familiar with it? We use like a berberine type product ever? How many milligrams did you use?
1,000.
Okay.
500 twice a day.
Okay. So we'll kind of get a little bit to that, but the way we kind of set ours up too, again, it's designed to be roughly per meal, but you can rotate it if it's every other, but that's kind of how we lay it out. And then our new formulation actually, I think, will be a little bit more, right? Maybe an extra capsule.
Yeah, it'll have a longer half-life.
Yeah, so, but I didn't tell them the secret ingredient.
Yeah, good. No one needs to know.
This is just kind of a cool study. I won't spend a lot of time on, but just talking about, I don't know if you guys have ever seen this before, but like the Kaiser study where it was at an A4M conference, they're talking about like, 90, 92, your blood sugar, you're fantastic, you're amazing, and then they kind of went back to this study to where, every point above an 84 is 6% increased risk of being diabetic, so it's kind of a pretty staggering stat there. So if someone's in the high 90s, et cetera, that can compound pretty quick for someone. Again, going back to my example earlier about family members around metformin and suppressor, and they don't exercise. You still need to exercise, mom and dad, but they were around 98, and doc said you're good. No, you're not. You're headed for some serious issues. Okay, so just to get you guys ready for Mr. Harris here, I want to give you guys a brief intro to carb cycling. So I took some of these out of the templates, just to give you kind of a visual and start getting the wheels turning as far as what type of questions you may have specific for Justin. As I mentioned, it's open Q&A. If you let him, he'll hold you guys here till about 7 o'clock tonight talking. And so we'll jump in. So here's a high level. Think of it like if I was talking to someone who's not this audience and they really didn't train much and didn't fully understand. I kind of describe it as like a 3-day diet. There's a high, medium, and low day. Generally, if we take it from the top, like your high day, let's just say as an example, for a bodybuilder or someone who's focused on transformation or their physique, a little more than performance would be like on their leg day, for example. Their other training days would be a quote-unquote medium day, and then their low day would be their non-strength training days. And for a couple of reasons of that, one is the difference between like a high day, we can go much, much higher on carbohydrates to cram more in because you're more depleted from those low days. And then we can also go much, much lower on the low day in a deeper calorie deficit. And it kind of helps us balance overall your total view through the course of a week or several weeks when you're carb cycling through it. One of the things is it was kind of labeled carb cycling. I think, if I remember correctly, I think you're the first person to do this, right?
I can't be. Mine was developed independently, but I would have to imagine other people have done it.
Before that, it was
Yeah,
pretty early.
you didn't really hear about it, so I don't know.
Justin used to do Polaroid pictures, first client check-ins. So for the kids, if you pull Google, you can look that up, what a Polaroid picture is, and you'll understand what we're talking about. So it was a while ago. I forgot where I was going with that. But anyways, it's kind of if you look at the way he maps out his plans, I'll let him talk more about it. But it's more of like a calorie rotation versus a carb cycling, but there's carbohydrate manipulation in there, based on activity levels you're doing, where you are in your diet and such. So you can kind of see the chart there as far as different, very, very high level. There's a lot of individualized programming that goes into that, but very high level. And then the last point before I hand it off to Justin I'll make is this is just something to kind of understand the diet and the day in the life of the diets overall. So a lot of times there'll be a difference in like regular meals and training meals, as well as, as I mentioned earlier before, as we got rolling here, Justin formulated the field rations for the intro workout because he was shipping, 7 different big bags of powder to people's houses. They thought they were a drug dealer, starting a lab or something. But so that's kind of the intro, but you can kind of see overall and how that lays out. There's different meals, and then he'll adjust the percent of carbs around training, etc., and things of that nature. So there's more of a kind of sandwich approach where you have like a pre and post workout, and then your other 3 meals if it was a 5-meal diet, and if it was a 6, obviously you just add a 4th meal in there. So that's kind of a high level introduction to how a diet lays out. Carb cycling, I know we kind of talked about a lot there from the start, from first detachment all the way through. But I'll be around for more questions, but I know for you guys can message me, email, go to our site, any of the million ways you can get a hold of us. I think Brian's got a virtual business card for me with like 17 different ways to get a hold of me, so I appreciate that, Brian. I'm really creative with my marketing, so it's joemiller1d.com, so it's really pretty smart, I think.
Well, what I like to do is I like to do Q&A. I'll start out just talking a little bit, but you guys are here for a reason. Maybe you have questions, want to learn. I can talk about the things I'm interested in, but who knows if that's what you guys want to know. So I like to do just Q&A. But I'll start out going back to the carb cycling, and I'll just kind of explain why I stumbled on it. I don't know that I was the first. I can't imagine I was the first. I mean, people have been dieting. I'm sure people were doing probably like Vince Garanda did really low, like 0 carbohydrates, and I think like periodically once a week he'd add them back in. But I call it carb cycling, but it's really calorie cycling. And I can tell you my thought process of where it kind of came about. So I figure there's 2 essential nutrients. There's only two things we have to eat in the diet to not die, and that's essential amino acids and essential fatty acids. So I thought on days I'm not training, I want to maximize that, my proteins and fats, but I don't need a lot of carbohydrates. I'm not training. I'm not burning off any glycogen. So that was kind of the original premise. Then beyond days you train, obviously you'd have more carbs. And I thought, well, then I want more carbs around training on the days I train. But then I kind of realized, it started really with fat loss with the carb cycling. I kind of realized we're bound by thermodynamics, meaning like diet's actually really simple. We're nothing but, we're like a 3-gas version of a car. You put in your car, you have a gas tank. You put gas in, that's energy, and then you drive, and if you don't drive all the gas off, then the next time you get in the car, you have that much gas remaining. If we could store that gas around the car, like body fat, that would be kind of how the body works. What makes it a little more complicated is that we don't just store one form of gasoline, we store 3. We have fat, obviously body fat, which we can store almost unlimited amounts. Then we have glycogen in the muscle and liver that we can store quite a bit. Like larger men can probably store around 1,000 grams of glycogen, females somewhere around 500 maybe. And then we can store protein, which would be muscle tissue. So that's where it kind of gets complicated, and where like the calories in, calories out doesn't seem to always work. But that's what we do. You eat. So all calorie is a measure of energy. It's the amount of energy it takes to raise 1 gram of water 1 degree Celsius. That's it. It's no different than a joule or like any energy. It's just as units of energy that we just happen to use calories. We actually use kilocalories, which is 1,000 times that. And so like you can do a lot of things just knowing that and working things through first principles. Like our body temperature is 98.6 degrees, right? So if I drink a gallon of 70-degree water, that 70-degree water has to be raised to 98.6 degrees in the body, and you can calculate how much calories are burned in that process. And if you actually do it, if you take like very close to freezing water, like 34-degree water, and you drink 8 liters a day, you'll burn about 200 calories just from drinking the water. I hate to even say that because I know so many people will take that and be like, well, now I got to drink freezing water. I don't want to drink that. But that everything works that way. So you can count in your diet. So if you eat 3,000 calories, and you burn 2,000 calories, you're going to store 1,000 calories. You can't always guarantee how they're going to be stored. Most of them will be stored as fat, probably. Some of them might be stored as muscle. How much is going to be much less than you think. And then some of them will be stored as glycogen. And when I say stored as muscle, like everyone thinks you need to eat a lot when you're growing. You know, you need to eat more calories than you burn to build muscle. One, you can build muscle even in a calorie deficit. And the reason is because the amount is so small. And two, the amount is so small. And it's small. I always say if you can always work through these things. That's, you know, I call it first principles. Like just start from what you know. A pound is 453 grams, right? So that is what a pound is. And so let's say if I were gonna, say I'm eating 300 grams of protein a day. If I'm synthesizing 300 grams of muscle a day, like I'm actually using 300 grams of protein to build muscle, that would be 300 grams in a day, which would be like 0.8 pounds, which would be 300 pounds of muscle a year. So if you're getting anything less than 300 pounds of muscle per year that you're gaining, means that's all protein that's not being utilized to build muscle. So that was kind of the next step with carb cycling, was how do I maximize the use of calories? Because obviously we're converting very, very, very small amount of protein we eat to actually new muscle. So much so, it's even less than that. That's if 1 gram of amino acid converted into 1 gram of protein. It's not, or 1 gram of muscle. It's not, because muscle proteins are like, you know, there's binding structures, there's all this other stuff in addition to the amino acid component. It's actually so much different than if you're getting 19 grams of protein synthesis a day. If you convert 19 grams of amino acids per day, just 19, less than 1 gram per hour, that's 50 grams of muscle a year. So people gaining like 10 pounds of muscle a year, which is a pretty good consistent, you know, at 10 pounds of muscle a year in 10 years means you gain 100 pounds of muscle and you're an elite bodybuilder or elite powerlifter. That's 3.8 grams of protein a day. That's it. That's what you're converting to muscle. So that's where my high days came from, because everyone else is just throwing protein at the problem. You know, you'd be on message boards 20 years ago, guys would be talking about eating 1,000 grams of protein a day. And I was like, wait, that's, you know, so that's over 2 pounds of protein a day as far as amino acids. So even if muscle is only amino acids, if that was actually working, they'd be gaining 2 pounds of muscle a day or 700 pounds a year, which they're not. And so really what it is, the diet, rather than just throw protein at the problem, and I'm not suggesting only eat 3.8 grams of protein a day, because there's other things, there's natural breakdown, you know, like I bump my thigh into the edge of that bar there, that damages the muscle, the body has to repair that, there's no protein turnover, we don't know how much that is, probably for most men, somewhere around 50 or 75 grams a day, maybe less, but who knows, I don't want to risk it, so let's say it's 100, so then even then you're only at 103 grams of protein a day. I never go that low, you know, anything I think to be the bare minimum, I'd probably still double it, but even then you're only at like 205 grams of protein a day. For someone my size, there's already more protein than they would ever need to build all the muscle they'll ever build. So rather than just add more protein, we want to, how do we make that better? How do we increase the likelihood that we'll get those 3 grams of protein synthesis a day? And that's where the high days came from. So my thought was, if I'm going low, and I'm going to take this from a fat loss approach, not an off-season approach, even though I'm talking about building muscle. Even though so on my low days, my carbs are really low, my calories are really low, my protein's either the same or slightly higher than medium day, and my fats are higher. My calories are really low, so I'm losing energy from the body. I'm burning stores of fat and stores of glycogen. And then on my medium day, I'll also be in a deficit, but not as extreme of a deficit, but the same thing's happening. So I'm burning fat and burning some glycogen from the muscle. So then I want to replace that glycogen. Well, that's when you realize that's the way to trick like thermodynamics. That's the way to eat more calories than you burn without actually storing fat. So just for round numbers, you could say someone my size could eat, maybe not right now, but when I was bigger, I could eat 250 grams of protein to 500 grams of carbs, and that'd be about my BMR. You know, so 250 grams of protein, 500 grams of carbs, that I'm not gaining or losing anything. Well, now, if over the course of the week, those low and medium days, if I became depleted, like I said, I could store 1,000 grams of glycogen. Let's say I got depleted 500 grams of glycogen over the course of the week. That now means on that high day, I can eat 1,000 grams of carbs without storing any fat. It's like, how awesome is that? You know, and I'm not like cheating the system because I am still storing those calories. I'm just storing them as glycogen because I ate carbohydrates in a state where my body was extremely glycogen depleted. So that's and you get all the benefits from that. You know, thyroid upregulation, metabolic increases. You'll notice after a high day, you're sweaty, really hot the next day, satisfies some cravings. You know, so you get all these benefits without violating the thermodynamics. That's like a law you can't violate. So that's kind of where it all came from. And then I'll just open up to any question on any topic. It doesn't even have to be nutrition or weight training, but preferably would be. Does anyone have anything? Yeah.
So, like for calorie cycling,
Mhm.
you're really more focused on the glycogen stores and managing those than you are anything else.
Yeah, because that's really all you can manipulate, you know?
Okay.
I mean, you can manipulate the fat stores, but that just means you can either burn them or store them, and we don't want to store them ever.
Okay.
You know, and you don't have much room for protein. And I never completed the thought. So what else am I doing with that really high, that 1,000 grams of carbohydrates? One, I'm hypercaloric, so I'm storing calories. But because I'm glycogen depleted and I'm eating carbohydrates, I'm storing them as glycogen. But what also happens with those high carbohydrates is insulin production is increased really high all day. And insulin is really interesting. It's a ligand binding system, meaning once it's bound, it shuffles proteins around in the cell. And so I always try to picture receptors. It's like this, like just a thing stuck on the cell, you know, and like hormone or peptide or whatever comes in. And so you have these cells and you have this insulin receptor. And insulin binds to it, and then what that does is it shovels some proteins around in the cell. And that's basically like in your shower drain when you open up the bottom and let the water flood, you know, drain back down. Like after you take a bath, you have kids and give them a bath. When that happens, that opens up like basically the shower drain for amino acids to be poured into the cell. You know, and then you have insulin, which is really anti-catabolic. It actually is anabolic in a weird, like minor pathway. But so you're not burning muscle, and then you increase amino acid uptake into the cell on a high calorie day. So even though your protein is much, much lower, we know we only need a few grams of protein synthesis a day to maximize muscle growth. We're more likely to get it.
So are you sticking to like your high day would that be 1 day a week or?
It depends. In fat loss periods, it's always 1 day a week.
Okay.
Yeah, because you still have to. I mean, we have to spend a period of time in a deficit to burn a pound of fat. A pound of fat has about 3,500 calories in it, so that's 500 calories a day. We're really only dieting 6 days out of the week, so we have to step it up a little bit. But that benefits us because we can push harder on those 6 days, get into deeper fat loss and a deeper glycogen depletion, which then we can refill on that high day and get all those benefits. But yeah, in the off season though, it's almost always starts at 2 for men. Women usually have to start at 1. And women, I feel for you because it's not fair because like some of these guys in here could probably eat 45, their BMR is probably 4,500 calories a day. So for them to lose 2 pounds of fat a week, it's a 1,000 calorie a day deficit. They're still eating 3,500 calories a day. You know, and women typically have a BMR just north of 1,500. You know, so for them to be in a 1,000 calorie deficit, they're eating 500 calories a day. That's torture. You know, that's starvation. So women just don't have like the maneuverability that the men do. So they almost always have to start at 1 high day. But my larger men will get to 3 high days a week. And that's about as high as I go with it because I only have them on training days and I prefer to have them non-consecutive because if you have 2 high days in a row, it's very likely that that second high day is no longer a glycogen storage day, but now it's a fat storage day. That's all you guys want to know?
I guess I had a question. I'm sitting here trying to figure out how to word it. So I guess I'll throw it out there a little bit like this. Almost 46. I've been a power lifter for I think 16 years. At one level, I was pretty high level, and
You look familiar, actually. Yeah. I don't know if we've met before.
we have met.
Okay.
It was years ago.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
So I have, at one time, when I hit my first 2,000 pound total raw, I went from 300 to 265 working with Mike Israel.
Mm-hmm.
Diet worked great. Now I'm coming back. I want to kind of took time off, injuries, blah, blah, blah. And before I'm 50, I want to hit that 2K plus again in sleeves. but I'm about 290, and the difference now, instead of then, aside of my age, is career. I have an extremely stressful job. So, working with your clients, I guess, have you noticed, I guess, age and cortisol levels? How do you see that transferring into the way you manipulate, let's say, a carb cycling diet in any way? Because I can tell you there's days where I'll be at work, I don't come home for 3 days, I barely eat, but I still try to get an hour of some type of training in because I have a home gym. But man, I can't either eat or I'm just shoveling anything in and my shit's all over the place.
Yeah, and that's where it's hard, and that's why it's, you know, it's kind of a young man's sport. It's really not, because in powerlifting and bodybuilding, you really don't reach your peak until around 40. But it's difficult because at age 40, we all have like real world things that have to. So there's only so much you can do. I manipulate more than just like if you saw the workout and regular meals. My calories will vary. If everything's working perfectly, if you're mooching off your girlfriend and living in her basement and you don't have anything to do but eat and work out, which is a decent amount of my clientele, then you can get hyper specific, you know. And for those guys, it's every meal, and like protein's usually pretty static across the meals, but the fats and carbs will vary within the days, even from meal to meal. With someone like you, we wouldn't be able to do that. It would be more, we need protein. You really want to spread out, because anytime your blood amino acid level dips, your body has to fill that somehow, and it can potentially break down muscle tissue to do it. And also, you only get like that 3 grams of protein synthesis a day, so you don't get very much. So we want to make sure there's always amino acids in the blood for any time there's any chance there's a trigger for it. We want to make sure all the nutrients to supply it are there. So protein is the one thing I really try to get people spread out. But then we'll take the carbs, like it'll be where before I might have someone say, I want 75 grams of carbs pre-workout, 25 grams in your intra, 100 grams post, 50 in this meal, 60 in that meal. For you, it would just be like, we need this many carbs for the day. Here's how I'd like you to get it, but I know I have it written as a 5 or 6 meal plan. I know that on the weekends or when work's not crazy, you can do that, but when work's crazy, you're not going to be able to. So if you have to squish this into 3 meals, then that's what we have to do. If you squish it into 2, that's what we have to do. And that's really all you can do. Is it'll be a more blunt tool, And the thing is that the weird thing about this sport is there's so many intricacies and so many specifics. It's hard not to get lost in them. But the worst thing you can do is get lost in them, because most of them don't matter. And I'll talk about all of them because they're there, But the little things, we're just fighting for that, like less than 5 grams of protein synthesis a day, And so we want to be precise with all these things, but most of those things, like an analogy I'll say is, because you guys remember Paul Borenson? Like years ago, he used to write like steroid cycles, and they'd be like these crazy. He'd recommend all these crazy things for like 6 weeks, and I always hated it because I was like, nothing happens in 6 weeks. Even if you're whatever this thing you just told people to do accelerates muscle growth 3x. For 3 weeks, we're only getting 10 pounds of muscle a year. So I gained like 6 ounces of muscle by killing myself. So really, what you want to do with the sport is it's much better to be 90% correct all the time than 100% correct 90% of the time. And like that 90% would be like, as long as you get your protein and your carbs and your fats that we plan, however you get them in, that's at least 90% of, you got the macros in, we got the correct food choices, we just have to cram them in these weird times, or cram them all into 3 meals, or 2 big huge meals, or 4, and that's, as long as you do that, but over the 10, 15, 20 years it takes to, like you said, turn to 50, this is a long game. And so I'll talk about all these specifics, but really, at the end of the day, 90% of all your guys' progress, it's really easy to get to 90% too. And here's another way to look at it. It's super easy to get to 90%. You can pretty much come up with a 90% perfect workout program off the top of your head. Just give you a pen, start writing, and anyone here who's put any effort into learning about the sport, learning about periodization, or learning about hypertrophy, or whatever your goals are, can write a program that's going to be about 90% as good as perfect, right? Now, on a scale from 0 to 100, you're already at 90, right? What's the likelihood that when you try new things, that new thing is going to be in that 10% better than 90%, or is it going to be in that huge space from 0 to 90? When you try new things, you're much more likely to get worse and do something worse than that basic core. You're like, train heavy, train the basic movements. That 90% is easy. The same thing with supplementation. It's easy to get 90%. A pre-workout, like a berberine suppressor type product, GDA, and an intra-workout. Boom, you're 90%. You're maybe creatine. Anyway, so all the other stuff, it's fun to talk about and think about, but that 90% is right there, easy in front of you. The diet's the same. The 90% diet would be, I call it pick it, kill it, grow it. If you can't pick it from a tree, grow it in the garden, or hunt it for meat, it shouldn't be part of the diet. That's the one thing that I would emphasize is when, you're not gonna be able to eat at perfect time, you're gonna be on the road, but when the food you pick, even if like you're cramming all your day into just 2 meals, look at the ingredients list and it should say the food you're eating. If it's got red dye number 4, you're like, whatever you're eating, the food list should be that food, meat, or rice, oats, potato. If it's got more ingredients than that, then you're outside of that 90%. But that pick it, kill it, grow it. Pick any workout routine any of you guys could write at first thought with a pencil, and then your basic supplementations, and do that for 10 years. And you don't even need to worry about all the weird stuff I'm going to talk about, because you're going to pass everybody over the course of those 10 years. That's actually like the dumb meathead, like powerlifter, bodybuilder, like the dumb meathead stereotype. It's not that people weight train are dumb, and most of the time the very opposite. I think the reason that that stereotype came about is the only people who become successful in any of the strength sports or physique sports are people who don't overthink and overanalyze things. Like Ronnie Coleman is a perfect example. The dude was like summa cum laude or magna cum laude or something. He graduated with honors as an accountant in college. But you talk to like Ronnie's Ronnie. Brian Dobson gave him a workout routine, and he did that same routine for 25 years. Guys want a new routine every month. Ronnie's been doing. He does first half of the week was his barbell work, second half of the week was his dumbbell work. He had a upper back day, which is like his pull down, and then a lower back day, which was his rows. He didn't even know what the terms were of anything. And he met Chad Nichols, and Chad Nichols told him to eat good old chicken, so he did it. He met Flex Wheeler, and Flex Wheeler told him what supplements to take, and so he took them. And then that's it. And just everyone else overthinks and overanalyzes. Ronnie didn't. Ronnie just took that piece of paper from Brian Dobson for 25 years and just and trained as hard as he could every workout. Ate his chicken with masterpiece barbecue sauce every meal. And that's the core. If anyone can take anything from here, that's the core thing. That there's the 3 pillars of progress, and that's your training, your diet, and your supplements. And not being 90% good on all of those all the time is better than trying to be 100% good 90% of the time. Because if 90% is easy, getting to 95%, you only got 10% from 90 to 100, you got 90% from 0 to 90. When you try a new thing, it's much more likely going to be worse than what you were doing. That was another thing I was going to add there that I forgot. But, yeah.
So I actually worked with you back in 2016 for
What's
about
the
a
name?
year. Brent Oziana.
Yeah, I forgot to talk about it.
So, when we first started, you had me pretty much on low days the whole time, and maybe one medium day, because we had to drop glycogen and everything.
Yeah.
What do you look for as far as how long that process takes? Because obviously it's going to be, it's not just 4 weeks and everyone's completely at a starting point.
Picks. Yeah, and it's I hardly use the scale at all. Clients put their in my template, and I've changed things quite a bit since 16. My diet plans are just dramatically more complete or involved. I was just doing macros then, right?
Yeah.
Macros. Yeah. Now I give a food list, a meal plan with the macros.
We have food lists and stuff like that.
Okay. Yeah. It's as I go, it's always kind of evolving and improving or increasing or depth. I totally forgot what was the question.
So kind of trying to when you start somebody out.
Oh yeah.
What
I look for, I don't know. I can't. It's hard to quantify because it's a quality. I look for in the pictures, and you can see. Well, everyone knows what they know. This is the hard part because everyone knows what it feels like to be flat. If you diet, right? That skinny fat feeling when you're flat. What do you all say? You feel flat, right? I can't feel you. You feel me?
Yeah.
I have to see it, but that's good because feeling flat is different than being flat. You'll feel flat most of the time when you are flat, but sometimes when you're not. That's why when clients always say, "Coach," especially like people competing, "Coach, I feel flat." No, you're dehydrated, so you're not gonna feel full. Your glycogen stores are full. It's like a skill you learn, I think. I look at it, and I don't use the scale. Everyone puts their weight on the scale. I hate the scale. It's so stupid. We use this thing, this scale, to track body composition progress. 70% of your body is water. 15% is fat. You know, so the scale measures water. That's it. You know, to lose 2 pounds of fat, you have to be in a 1,000-calorie deficit. For women, you have to starve for a week straight, do 2 hours of cardio a day, and maybe lose 2 pounds of fat. To gain 2 pounds of weight, you just have that Gatorade Zero is 3 pounds. You know, it's like I can drown out a month of work just by drinking that as far as the scale. And like I'd go back to the vehicle analogy. It would be like using the scale to track progress would be like weighing your car to figure out how much gas is in it. You know, can you imagine like every day, like on your driveway, you roll over a thing and it told you how much your car weighed. You're like, well, I think I got gas. I mean, I got 4 kids in the car today. Yesterday I only got 2. We got luggage in the back. You know, all those things affect the weight way more than the gas tank. Yes, when you're low on gas, your car will weigh less. But how much your car weighs is much more dependent on who's in the vehicle, is there luggage in the vehicle, and the scale is the same way. How much you weigh is almost, in the short term, is almost entirely dependent on sodium and water balance. Over time, you know, like fat loss is linear. If you're on a proper fat loss plan, losing 1.5 to 2 pounds of fat a week, your body fat's gonna drop like that. But the scale is gonna go like this. And so much so that on a bloated day at week 4, you can weigh more than a dehydrated day you did on week 1, even though you've lost 8 pounds of fat in that process.
When you said that in the sport you peak around 40, why is that? And would you say that that's true for men and women?
Yeah, it's men and women. Well, I don't know what I'm allowed to say. I'm talking about untested athletes more than, because obviously, like in the tested sports, you know, like you'll get a rare Tom Brady, but in most cases, because it's linked to hormones, you know, and so typically, like male, female are a little bit different, but typically, like our peak years are early to mid 20s as far as hormone production and being old enough to have built the muscle. And so that's why most sports, like football, basketball, people are at their peak in their mid 20s. For the sports I'm talking about, allegedly, some of the people have elevated hormone levels. So that, you know, the hormone part is taken out of the equation. Where like a natural person, you're gonna have child, you know, they reach teenage years, their hormones are gonna peak, they're gonna stay there into the mid 20s and slowly, but by the time they get to like mid 30s, it's plummeted quite a bit, and then it's a really different. So that's really what it is. It's that's out of the equation, and then getting stronger and building muscle takes a lot of time. It's actually like it sucks that it does so much, because when you start working out when you're like a teenager, right? Where like muscle gives you respect, you know, it's like that's a cool thing. And so you start working out, and then you put 10 years in it, you're jacked, you got all these muscles, but now you're 35 or whatever. Now having like a lot of money and having a career is what gets you stuck. So now you're all jacked with your kids, and everyone thinks you're a bad parent because you got muscle. But it's like a big crappy thing. It's like you finally reach the end result, and now the goal has been shifted.
Would you suggest carb cycling to anybody that does intermittent fasting?
Yeah, it's the thing. And intermittent fasting really, it's not a form of carb cycling, but it is a form of calorie cycling, you know. And the intermittent fasting is, my opinion on that is, if you are a performance athlete or a bodybuilder, or I don't like intermittent fasting, because our diet is like, the calories don't mean anything other than we know this amount of these foods are what we need. Intermittent fasting is awesome because it's hard to overeat, because you're restricted in a period of time. And there's some benefits, like, I hate to use the word health, and this will be why, there's some health benefits to it, but health is a loaded word, because the health benefits to intermittent fasting are that periods of very, very low calorie consumption tend to make you live longer. And so that is a form of health. But like, people use health to mean anything. People mean health, like, I want to run faster, or run longer, or or get stronger, or have muscle. And people all consider that health, but each one of those has a totally different pathway to get there. So there's some health benefits in that. If you consider health to be how long you live, intermittent fasting or any period of very low calorie consumption, like large chunks, is really good. But yeah, we would still do the same thing. And I have some people, because intermittent fasting is kind of really popular right now, so I have a number of clients who really, really want to do intermittent fasting. So we'll knock them down to, like, less meals, maybe 3, maybe 4 meals a day. rarely, like I think of one time I've done 2 meals a day where they had a really sharp eating window, but we still do the carb cycling or calorie cycling.
With the high protein, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I don't like that. The other reason I don't like it is, yeah, because we still do the high protein, but like we just talked about, like if you don't like muscle growth is a rare and small occurrence, you know. So you want your blood amino acid levels to always be slightly elevated, because to synthesize new muscle tissue, so mTOR is triggered, and there's a cell that wants to combine amino acid structures with other like binding mechanisms to thicken that muscle protein. At that cell, for that to happen, all 20 amino acids have to be immediately available in close proximity to that cell. And 11 of them, the essential amino acids, have to come from the diet. Is that right, 11? Are there 9 or 11? It can't be 9. Another would be 10. Yeah. What's that?
I thought it was 11.
Yeah, 11, okay, perfect. I can never remember. I can name them all, I guess I could count them out that way. But yeah, so all 11 of them, the essential amino acids have to come from the diet. You can synthesize the non-essential amino acids from the essential amino acids. But like if you're eating from 2 p.m. to 8 p.m., and say there's that stimulus at 8 a.m. or 10 a.m. or noon, and you haven't eaten since 8 p.m. last night, you might not have all the amino acids there. And so protein, at the very least, I really try to spread out as much as possible throughout the day. And that's another reason I do pick it, kill it, grow it, why I'm not a huge fan of protein powders. They have a place sometimes, especially like with the traveling and stuff where you have to do it, but like a whey isolate can digest in like an hour and a half. Most of it's all completely digested, assimilated into the bloodstream in an hour and a half. So you have so we know like 3 grams of protein a day, is all we're really getting for most protein synthesis, probably 5 at the most. That would be like, let's say like, that 5 is like almost already to 15 or 18 pounds of muscle a year. Well, if you have that 50 grams of protein and all of it is gone in an hour and a half, all you did was drink like a real crappy carbohydrate. Because that's what happens with protein. We don't synthesize new muscle. So what can protein do? The first thing, and that's why protein is thermogenic. Because you eat protein, it goes in the body, you eat 100 calories of protein, it goes in the body as 100 calories, right? Very, very little of it gets used as a protein. No protein turnover, repairing gut damage, repairing, like damaged tissue, and then a very, 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 very small portion of that gets synthesized as new muscle. After that, so if you eat 100 calories of protein, maybe 10 calories of it is used, maybe 20 calories is used of it as a protein. Now you have 80 calories that you can't use for anything. Your body has to convert it to something else. It's called gluconeogenesis. It's a descriptive word. Glucose, glucose, neo is new, and genesis is create. So you're creating glucose from those amino acids. That takes energy, because you're changing, you can't build, like building blocks, you can't change anything without energy. It doesn't just happen. It doesn't, like another law of the universe is entropy. The law of everything always decays to a less organized structure. Everything does. And so if you create a new organized structure, which would be glucose or protein, that takes energy, maybe 10 or 15% of the calories. So now we had 80 calories left over. 10 of those calories went to converting that, so that those are not real net calories because they were burned off in that process. Now you have 70 calories left of glucose. And then that glucose can be stored as muscle glycogen, can be used for energy. Most of it will, but maybe 10 grams of that doesn't get used for any of that, and it has to go through a further conversion to the fatty acid synthesis pathway to convert to fatty acids, and that might be another 5% of the calories. And that's why protein is thermodynamic, or thermodynamic, and why calories in versus calories out seems like it doesn't work all the time, because it does, but the calories go through different processes in the body, and some of them, like protein, is actually as much as, in really crazy severe cases, as much as 30% of the protein will get burned off just in that process, that cascade from protein to glucose to fat.
So I'm a collegiate athlete, so like I'm gonna have practice like 5-6 days a week, and I'll lift like 3 or 4. How would you carb cycle? Like, would I just stay high all the time? Like,
well, yours is different. And another thing I didn't clarify is, an important thing is, everyone thinks performance and appearance are the same. They're very, very different. And I'll use like 2 crystal clear examples would be Tyson Fury, heavyweight boxing champion of the world. I don't know if you guys have ever seen him.
Yeah.
He's like, back fat up ass. But he's really kick your ass, or Daniel Cormier, he was former UFC light heavyweight and heavyweight champion. So literally like the fattest man on the planet. And he was a little mush ball too. Not little, a big mush ball. And so training is for performance. Nutrition is for how you look. That's the general way I look at it. So nutrition for performance is different than nutrition for how you look. Like, if you're eating to maximize muscle growth, you're gonna wanna eat, you want the food to happen during and after the activity. But that doesn't help your performance because you didn't have the food before. If you want to maximize performance, you want the calories and the glycogen and the food before, which sounds counterintuitive because the first thought people have, well, if I have a better workout, won't I grow more? Yes, if all things are equal, but you'll only grow more if there's that nutrients there to support the growth, which there won't be because you ate them all before. So like for performance, for powerlifters, my high days will often be the day before their biggest lifts. For bodybuilders, it's always on the day of that lift, or of that workout, whatever body part you're trying to bring up, or one of the largest body parts. So for you, there would be days you don't train with weights already, so those will be lower calorie than the other days. So we'll have like a base calorie and carb amount that we know you need to kind of recover and fuel everything for your normal practices. And then we'll have that would be like your low day. If you have any days off completely for practice?
Yeah, usually like Saturday, Sunday.
Yeah, so those would be your low days. And those would be days, and it's much more loose because I know you're in college and you're not gonna like cook chicken breast, you know.
Actually, I get to cook all my.
Oh, okay, cool. But it's I mean, you're not like, trying to get away from Mr. Olympia. You'll eat out. So we'll be more basic. Your low days will be more focused on protein and fat, not worried about carbohydrates as much, healthy fats, good proteins. And then your base day would be the days that you do just practices without weight training, probably, because you're trying to grow probably, or at least maintain.
Yeah, I'm trying to grow.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So you have 3 weight sessions a week. Or?
Yeah, Monday, Wednesday, Friday.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So here's how we do that. So Monday, Wednesday, Friday would be your high days, and those would be days with the most calories and the most carbohydrates. But even though it's the most calories, oddly enough, it'd be the lowest protein and fat. But there's still more than enough protein, and there's still fat because protein is high fat. Even lean protein is pretty high fat. I mean, even chicken is 2.5 grams of fat per 100 calories, something roughly like that, which is that's over 20% fat. So even chicken breast is 20% fat. That's like when people say, like, when I see these low-fat diets, people say no more than 10% fat from the diet. It's impossible unless you're eating only whey protein. But then the other, then Tuesday and Thursday would be your medium days, which would be still higher calorie, but not as many carbohydrates, and a little more fats. And then the weekend would be your days where we just have protein and fats focused on.
Okay. So how low would you like drop your protein on the high calorie days?
Jay Cutler at 300 pounds off season weight for a while was eating 180 grams of protein a day.
Yeah, well, I'm not 300 pounds. I'm like 200 pounds.
But I'm using that as most people scoff at 180 grams. That's too low. So it's hard to say exactly, but I rarely bring someone less than 1 gram per pound of body weight.
Okay.
Yeah, unless they're really obese, but yeah, that's probably about the lowest I would go with you.
Okay. And then on the low days, you probably like 240, about 200 pounds.
Probably closer to 300.
300,
Yeah, somewhere between 250 and 300. Probably I focus on 50 grams of protein a meal, probably like 5 or 6 meals. And then on your medium days would probably be like 45 grams of protein, 40 to 45 per meal, same amount. Then your high days would be like 30. But we were trying to do, my high days are high. Like most of my big guys are around 1,000 grams of carbs. And the other thing I do with that is we split the carbs 50-50 complex and sugary. So in every meal, 50% of the or up to 50% of the carbs come from sugary sources. And there isn't but people are really obsessed, will think, oh, I don't want the sugar, I want to do what's best. But if you eat 1,000 grams of rice a day, you're going to get distension, you're going to have GI upset. And even 500 grams of carbs from rice, your insulin levels are spiked all day already. So worrying about the sugar spiking insulin is silly because you're eating 1,000 grams of carbs. There's no case where your insulin's not high all day from that. In the back for a second.
So I've had like a weird issue with my blood sugar as a whole, and I've tried going to the doctors and stuff about it, but it's like always low. So whenever I try to put myself in a deficit, it goes extremely low, like 30s and 40s, particularly around when I'm working.
What are your liver enzymes?
I can't recall offhand, but they were never like that crazy or anything.
Well, because I see that because the liver controls the release of liver glycogen to maintain stable blood sugars. And so it doesn't always show in the AST and ALT, but if there's any kind of issue with the liver's ability to function, and it doesn't take much because weight training alone already will raise your liver enzymes. You'll get cases where if you burn through blood sugar really quickly, and your liver is just even a little bit not good at like releasing glycogen. That's actually a really common thing with alcoholics. When alcoholics stop drinking, is they'll have severe bouts of hypoglycemia for months and months, or even years after they've gone through withdrawals and everything, just because their liver isn't able to. So that would be a tough one. What I would focus on would be trying to slow down the digestion of foods, so you have a slow trickle of carbohydrates, which would be like probably decrease the percentage of fats, because fats will always slow the digestion and slow the release of foods in the bloodstream. That would be the first thing we did. And we'd look for really like stable, complex carbohydrates, and never in big bursts. We try to stabilize them and spread them out. We'd probably include vegetables, which will also slow the breakdown and digestion of everything. Yeah, I have the same thing actually. I call my Paul Blart moments. You guys ever remember that movie, Paul? You get low blood sugar. That happens like every time we do it. If I do like a 6 p.m. podcast, it's like every time. I don't know, I think I get excited when I start talking, and like it's like 6 p.m. every day. I don't know, like my liver decides not to release liver glycogen, and I get low blood sugar almost like probably like 2 or 3 times a week every time around that late afternoon time.
Yeah, so I was just curious how like important a role it is like eating carbohydrates that tend to be like high inflammatory. So like I eat like a lot of like oatmeal like every day. It's like my breakfast. There's like a lot of rhetoric or things I see online about people talking about how it's bad for gut health and
oatmeal
high inflammatory. Yeah, that's
oatmeal is real. I hate that because it's like something picky. It's like compared to what? Like compared to like processed sugar? No. Compared to the most perfect low inflammation food ever created, possibly. But like as far as like a total range, it's really low inflammation. It's got high amounts of soluble fiber, which is good for inflammation. The fats that are in it, not much fat, but the fats that are in it are omega-3 fats predominantly. So, but I mean, I'm not a huge oat fan because they are, how am I gonna word this? You put Mentos in a Diet Coke? Well, because the Mentos have like tons of like, what's the C word? Correct. Man, my brain's not working. But just dimples, like really microscopic ones. So that increases the surface area. You take a smooth ball, and that's the surface area. Well, if you have all these like thousands of micro things like that, if you were to stretch that out, that would make that tiny Mentos really huge. And that surface area creates like pressure differences that the CO2 is unable to like pull out of the soda and create that whole thing. Well, everything works that way. So oats, you can picture, like they're big flakes. No matter how well you chew them, you're not going to completely disintegrate them. So they get into the stomach, and they're this big chunk. They press against other big chunks where like pressure differences can happen, and then those chunks have to all be broken down. Because you don't digest carbohydrates. No, you don't, or polysaccharides. You only digest sugars. The only thing that can pass the small intestine into the bloodstream are sugars. There's, glucose, galactose, fructose. Doesn't matter. But so you have that. It's like yeah. So you have all that going on. That's really what I think the oat problem is with digestion. It's basically like Mentos, to a really lower level. It's hard to break those down to, and then even when they're cooked all the way, like if they're old-fashioned oats, it's hard to cook them all the way. You almost got overnight cook them.
So is the problem like that they're like pieces then? Because I'm allergic to wheat, so I have like oat flour a lot.
I have a celiac also.
So would that be like okay then, or better in your opinion, because it's ground up?
Yeah. I hate the word better because different. If it's ground up, yes, it will digest more smoothly, more quickly. There are cases where you want the slow digestion, and if those issues don't happen to you, like some people have like massive amounts of stomach acids and just they're billy goats, and like in those cases, yeah, you want old-fashioned oats that are digest slowly, because all those things like the Mentos stuff doesn't affect them. But if it does, if you have, and most people do, I think there's a real interesting thing going on with GI health, because I've been doing this since the late 90s, and no one had GI issues. Like having a patient with colitis or Crohn's you never had them. No, everyone's got IBS, Crohn's, colitis, celiac, SIBO, candida. It's like crazy, and I'm sure it's the way we process food, because we process wheat differently than other countries do. I don't know, like if you've been to Mexico, I bet you could eat flour in Mexico, because we process the wheat differently. That causes the main issue. Because even I had full-on celiac at one time. If I eat wheat, I'm sick and miserable. It's terrible. I mean, it's terrible. I can find it. I'll know, like, I didn't know I didn't eat any. But I'll be so sick, I'll know I had it. We'll end up finding it in some weird seasoning or something. But I one time ate a flour tortilla in Mexico without thinking it was corn, and I found out about it, and I didn't feel great, but it was entirely different, like 100 times milder. Yeah, so I was kind of a tangent.
Any negative effects of berberine on muscle growth at all?
No, and that's tough. We actually were putting out a research study. My nutritionist Thomas Lackey just finished it. I'm waiting for him to send it over to me. Not really, and the study's going to show berberine's really interesting. For one, if your blood sugar's high, then that's affecting muscle growth way more than you know what I mean? It's like I use this analogy. It's like a deck chair on the Titanic. You know, like yes, technically metformin through the CMP, cyclic AMP pathway is anti-hypertrophy, right? But if you're on anabolics, weight training, and eating a high-protein diet, yes, technically you're going to build less muscle, but it's like taking a deck chair off the Titanic and saying that it weighs less. Yes, technically it weighs less, but like it doesn't change really anything. So the net impact of having poor blood glucose control is 1,000 times, probably 10,000 times more detrimental to progress than anything berberine could do. But berberine is also different because there is some cyclic AMP action with berberine, but there's actually, berberine works through a cascade reaction with IGF-1. And the weirdest thing with this is, depending on the research study you read, it will appear that it increases IGF-1 or lowers IGF-1. And it's like, well, to me it's like, how can it lower IGF-1? Because IGF-1 is insulinogenic, and it appears to be that's the general, because berberine doesn't seem to really improve tissue sensitivity as much as it seems to create, it causes the pancreas to release insulin more efficiently. And IGF-1 would be kind of like in line with that, you know, correlate with that, because IGF-1 is actually more insulinogenic than insulin itself on a milligram per milligram basis. Your body just produces really, really small amounts of it. So from all the studies I have, and this research study will like say it more precisely, I think berberine clearly overall it benefits muscle growth. Because like Joe was saying, like how fine that line is, you know, like technically 99, fasted blood sugar 99 is normal, but it's clearly not optimal, you know. And so the increased rate of muscle growth you're going to have from having a fasted blood sugar of 75 versus 99 is dramatically higher and far more than any potential decrease in muscle growth from the things you took to get that blood sugar down there. But on top of that, I don't even think berberine is a detriment to muscle growth, period, on top of that. But even if it was, it's controlling blood sugar is what matters. And our new berberine, I can't see the chemical, I've been waiting for like a year. The problem with berberine can be more effective than metformin even, and it doesn't cause gut issues. It potentially can increase IGF-1. It increases free testosterone levels, so it's got like other cool stuff on top of it. The problem is it's got a short half-life, like a 5-hour half-life, and it's very not bioavailable. Your gut breaks it down really quickly, and so it's hard to get it in the bloodstream. And when it does get in the bloodstream, it only stays there for 5 hours before it's gone through a full half-life. And the half-life's not active life. That just means it's only 50% active for the next 5 hours. But so everyone's kind of looking at dihydroberberine because it's a higher bioavailability than berberine. And like what Joe was saying about reading the studies, no one reads the studies because everyone's looking at that. But if you read any of the studies on dihydroberberine, you'd see that yes, it is more bioavailable. And if all you're doing is searching for that keyword, you know, control F bioavailable, then it'll look like this is great. But the studies don't show any improvement in blood glucose over berberine alone. So no one has like a conclusion for why, but it seems to get in the bloodstream better for whatever reason, but must be the process of cleaving that dihydro portion of the berberine must do something to the way the berberine works because it doesn't appear to improve to be more effective than berberine alone, even though it does appear to be more bioavailable. But there is something that you can add that we're adding to berberine that increases the bioavailability and it increases the duration, mechanism of action, and half-life quite dramatically, and so much so that the studies show an improvement of blood glucose control 20 to 25% better than berberine alone, which effectively makes 1,500 milligrams of suppressor max, our new product, more effective than 1,000 milligrams of prescription metformin a day. We're super pumped about it, but yeah, no, I don't think there's any worry at all. And even if there was, improving your blood sugar is going to increase the rate of muscle growth far more than that would decrease it. And someone had a hand up over here before. Yeah.
So let's going back to your protein powder. I know you're not a fan, but say you train first thing in the morning, and you said it takes like an hour and a half to get into your bloodstream. So would you recommend like liquid protein, liquid carb versus food or food?
No, always whole food. I mean, my recommendation, I'm not, like, this is like a 90% thing, you know, like eating like liquid carbs and a whey isolate, and getting the correct macros is gonna be better than Wendy's or not eating at all, you know. But all things being equal, always whole food. And I think the supplement industry, I mean, we own a supplement company, but I hate the supplement industry for
I told you.
Yeah, I really do. And I hate it also because it's harder for us to grow as a company because there's certain things I refuse to do. But like the liquid protein thing, it's just, has any of you guys hung out with pro bodybuilders? You will never, ever, ever see any of them ever drink a protein drink, ever. Even none, like, a lot of them even like when they're doing like, they used to do those day in the life and they pretend to drink one. They won't even drink it for pretend, you know? Because in the supplement industry, like, a brilliant move, you know, farmers had curds and whey, you know, and they would take the curds and they would make cottage cheese with it and they'd throw the whey away and mix it in with feedstock. And then, like, I don't know, Twin Lab or some company 25, 30 years ago was like, hey, that's got protein in it, right? And they're like, yeah, but it's worthless, you know? Like, can't do anything with it. And they're like, no, we can do something with it. We can convince bodybuilders that if they don't take this inferior product, they're going to slow the growth. And, you know, like you can hear like them talking. But won't they notice that they're growing slower? No, they never notice that. They think whatever we tell them. Like, we're in the Weeder magazines. We tell them what they believe, you know? So, yeah, I mean, all things being equal, it's better than nothing. And much better than nothing. I'm not like acting like I don't always have protein powder in my house. You know, I've had a bottle of protein for the last 30 years consecutively. Not the same one, but there's always one in there for those cases. But ideally, even then, because it doesn't take an hour and a half to get in the system. What I was saying is the whey is in and out in an hour and a half. So it's where if you eat chicken, the first amino acids are getting in the bloodstream only a few minutes later than the whey isolate. Technically, the whey is going to get there faster, but you're talking several minute difference. And then that chicken's going to be in. Yeah, and I use this analogy every time, and it's kind of gross, but like a meat, everyone at some point in their life has gotten sick and thrown up, and there's like chunks of steak in the puke, and you're like, who the fuck did I eat steak? You know? Like, was that yesterday? Was that the day before? You know, like, so like you eat a meat, and you don't have to worry about any low levels of blood amino acid for a day or more. Where whey, an hour and a half later, you're already not building muscle.
And I have one more question. What's your view on eating like during the day, like daylight versus when the sun's down? Like, do you have like a view on that, like getting your food in at that?
No, I mean the food is not that intelligent. You know, they're 4 internal clock. But no, it's because it doesn't matter, and that's another thing. Like, cause that's why I hate the fitness industry. Because people are like, you can't eat before bed. Why? Because you'll get turned to fat. How? And
I just didn't know, like,
no, I'm not understanding you. No, I'm being like excessive just to kind of prove a point. So if it did turn to fat, all that meant was that same amount of calories had to be burned from fat earlier in the day, because it's still all calories in, calories out, thermodynamics. And if you don't believe, like, energy can't be created or destroyed, the law of conservation of energy is like one of the most powerful laws in the universe. So much so that every physicist of the last 150 years, since the laws of thermodynamics were worked out by Boltzmann, has dreamt of disproving that. Because if you can violate that even once, we don't have to dig for coal, we don't have to do nuclear power, we just snap our fingers and have free power. So A, you win the Nobel Prize, like, do not pass go, just go directly to Sweden and wait for your Nobel Prize. And 2, on the way there, you're gonna become the world's first trillionaire, because you solved no need for oil companies, no need for energy companies, no need, you know, like, you power your home by wishful thinking at that point. You don't have to pay the electricity bill. So that's how important it is. It doesn't matter. If you eat all your calories right before bed, yes, you will store fat because it's more calories than you're burning, and you're just going to go to sleep, and so those calories are stored as fat. But that also means you were burning calories all day when you weren't eating, so you're burning fat all day in equal proportion to the fat. So
I just didn't know if it, like, because obviously you release insulin and blood sugar. Like, I didn't know if that was like an issue when you're sleeping.
yeah, you will. It's confusing because it's like a kind of a nuanced thing. So if I say I burn 2,000 calories and I eat 2,000 calories in any 24-hour period. If I spread it all out, there's most likely not going to be any periods where I'm really storing. I'm in and out, right? Like I eat 100 calories, I burn 100 calories. Eat 100 calories, burn 100. Spread out through the day. If I eat all 2,000 calories right before bed, I still burn 2,000 calories for the day. That didn't change. So now what that means is I burn 2,000 calories all day. I've lost 2,000 calories of fat through that process, fat and glycogen, and then I eat 2,000 calories, go to bed, then I store all 2,000 calories. The net result is still 0 in both cases. And so the reason that works, like don't eat before bed, is because most people aren't tracking their calories. Most people are eating when they're hungry. And so if you ate all day, whatever you ate, you have the same person, today I ate this food, tomorrow I ate the exact same food, only this day I also ate an extra meal and then went to sleep, yes, then that's going to turn to fat. But it's because you ate the extra meal, and it doesn't matter that it was before bed. If you ate that extra meal earlier in the day, the same net result would within very, very, very minor differences. And that's where carb cycle comes in, because the net calorie difference is the same. But you can do some minor manipulation about what stores glycogen and what stores fat, and there's some interplay with that. But that takes like several years of doing the carb cycle. You do the carb cycling. That's kind of a way to cheat it, but it's not anything you're going to notice a change in body composition in 6 weeks or even 3 months. But over 2 years, you'll notice you might have 1 more pound of muscle, 1 less pound of fat for the same net calorie difference. So there is a little bit of that, but for the most part, no, not at all. And I hate that, fitness influencers, even some doctors will say stupid stuff about that. And it's anytime someone says something, I want to be like, can you work it out first principle step by step? Because you'd have to eventually, come to the conclusion, I burned 2,000 calories over the course of any period, 24 hours, we just use a 24-hour. Everything we do, it's hard not to, it's called anthropomorphic, the way we view the world. We view everything in that, because we stand on the earth with constant gravity. The rest of the universe isn't necessarily that way, most places, you don't feel much gravity because you're so far away from objects. So we live in a specific case from that, and we have a 24-hour period, which we call a day, and we think it has importance, but that's just because it's how long the earth goes around, and then we sleep at night and wake during the day, but none of that matters. It's just over any given time, 24 hours, 22 hours, 30 hours, 3 months, you burn some amount of calories and you ingest some amount of calories. There might be, if you eat right before bed, in that local instant, yes, you'll be storing some of those calories as fat, but because the net balance is the same, that only meant that you lost those calories of fat earlier in the day.
How important is food quality, grass-fed, organic versus the minute-made rice versus the organic?
That's a tough one. Because important for what? How you look or how you perform? Not at all. But whether or not you get Roundup in your system and potentially have issues like an increased risk of cancer or some gut diseases, yes. So that's back to that health word, no, whether or not he's going to get a 2,000-pound total doesn't matter if he eats grass-fed or organic or frozen chicken. The macros matter, but if that chicken is covered in Roundup, when he's 70, he's at a slightly higher risk for cancer than if it wasn't covered in Roundup.
So I'm kind of going back 10 minutes or so when you were talking about Jay Cutler being on 180 grams of protein in the off-season just cycling. I do weightlifting, and it was actually at another nutrition seminar 2 weeks ago where they talked specifically about it. And when they touched on carb cycling, they recommended protein not being touched at all. So for me, they were recommending 300 grams of protein a day. You just cycle primarily carbs, then maybe fat, specifically for the joint and soft tissue support, just for any kind of repair that need to have happen. Would that be something that you disagree with? Or
and I don't disagree with it. I'm not to be a dick, but it's not a feeling. It's you don't have 300 grams of protein needs a day.
Right.
Period. You don't. At your size, even you run a marathon, and if I remember correctly, if this was from school 25 years ago, they assumed a 50 to 75 gram protein turnover breakdown from running a marathon. Even running 26 miles a day, where you're basically in rhabdomyolysis afterwards, peeing black because all the breakdown of the body, it takes 75 grams of protein to repair all the damage from that. And so our weight training is obviously less than that. you know. So that's why I said, like, you can assume most of us probably like 50 to 75 grams a day is even a high-end estimate of what we need for protein turnover. And then for protein synthesis, we need like 3 grams above that. You know, I never would go that low because I don't want to like, you know, I don't want to risk like the razor's edge. So I'll always double it at least, you know. But even then, you're at 150 grams or 156 grams, you know, of the high end of doubling it. I still would never really go that low, just mostly because I don't want to have to explain this to a client, you know, like, and convince them, like, I don't have to have them go through like an exercise physiology degree to believe it's actually true. Because, like, I hate, one of my biggest pet peeves is trust the process. You know, like, no, I want to trust the process. Explain it to me. If you know it, then I don't have to trust it. I can just know it. But no, I don't, because there's no case at all, and not even more so when carbohydrates are that high. Because when people say carbohydrates are protein sparing, what they mean is because most of the protein you eat gets turned into a carbohydrate before it's actually used by the body. And so when you eat those carbohydrates, you don't have to do that. So in that case, it's not protein sparing. It just means that that protein doesn't spend very much time in the gluconeogenesis path, and it jumps right to fatty acid synthesis path and gets stored as fat. So you're just more likely to store the protein as fat. Yeah, I don't drop like dramatically lower. Like my diet is like 50 grams of protein in 6 meals on my medium and low day. Sometimes, like if I'm really like hyper-focused and care to like weigh it out that much different, I'll do 55 grams on my low day, and my high day is 40 grams a meal. So it's not like a dramatic difference, but I want those that's 10 extra grams of carbs I can eat, and that's my goal on that day.
So like obviously like your take on the protein powders, like what about like carb powders, like the maltodextrin and stuff like that? If you like kind of like what she said over there, like I train like 6 a.m. in the morning, you know, so getting up at like 4:30 or whatever, and then like it's just super hard to obviously eat a full like meal like that. So like would it be better than it just at least getting like the protein in as like a whole food?
And that's a really good way to put it actually, is like if you can't eat, you know, like that's better than not eating, you know. I'm viewing it as like, if you have an appetite, you're not puking, you're not, you know, like it wasn't that hard of a leg workout or whatever you're trying, you know, if you can eat a whole meal, always do that. If it's like 6 a.m. and you're tired, it's hard to get food down, then a carb powder is a viable source. But like the thing with maltodextrin that's interesting is maltodextrin is just, it's like a pencil of glucose molecules. And so go back to surface area, you can't pluck glucose from the center of that pencil, you can only pluck off the ends, you know? And so you have these pencils basically floating through the bloodstream, and they pluck a glucose off both ends. You get two glucose at a time, kind of until it works its way through the pencil. And so it's interesting in that it's better than just pure sugar, but not much better. It's only like, you know, twice as good. Where like our highly branched cyclodextrins, I'll just yell, our highly branched cyclodextrins that are in our field rations, and I actually would recommend that because in this case, that's a liquid carbohydrate that's both faster and slower digesting than regular carbohydrates. And how that works is cyclodextrins are like conic structures, like a road cone, you know, like a highway orange road cone, and it's hydrophilic on one side, hydrophobic on the other. And not to get too off track, but everyone knows Febreze, right? Febreze are cyclodextrins. And so the reason you can Febreze and forget it is you spray on stink, and because stink gets trapped in those cones, and it stays that way until some future date when you get a wet washcloth, wash it over, and it reverses that hydrophilic nature. The stink then leaves, the cyclodextrin goes into the washcloth, and that's how that works. Ours can actually work that same way by trapping amino acids in the cones, but highly branched cyclodextrins are these massive clusters of those cyclodextrins. So you have all the surface area. Instead of like a pencil where you can pluck 2 off at a time, you have like thousands of glucose molecules you can pluck off at a time. So as soon as that gets in the small intestine, all the surface area glucose molecules can start traveling across the small intestine into the bloodstream. But because they're so huge, it takes forever to get all of them down. So you get really quick, immediate blood sugar release that's also really sustained. So you drink. So if you had a timeline graph, you know, and you drank just sugar, like glucose, it would be like sit in the stomach, get to the small intestine, all goes in the bloodstream and then back down. If you had maltodextrin, it would be like sit in the stomach. It'd be like twice as long, but it's still really short. And it's getting a little quicker because it's got the two, you know, so rather than spike right here, it's kind of dragged out over here like a bell curve, where like highly branched cyclodextrins, you have almost like, it gets in the bloodstream quicker than pure glucose, so right away, and then it stays there because it takes so long to decay that whole huge massive cluster. So you have the same, you know, so you don't have the spikes, but you get early release and sustained release. So I guess, long story short, carbohydrates are a little bit different because liquid carbohydrates can actually be slower digesting than food carbohydrates.
But if you're gonna go with the powder, go with the highly branched.
Yeah, even if you don't use ours, even if you just go somewhere else and get it. Yeah, I mean, I hope you get ours, because I got family to feed, but I got a large family too.
So could you do if you just at least maybe ate at least be a little bit easier, just eat some chicken or something, at least get the whole protein in, but then instead of it all rice and all that.
And I'm not gonna act like when I competed and I cared, but I do that. I use ours intra as a post workout carbohydrate quite a bit because meat's easy to eat. I love meat, or a lot of times I'll do mix of meat and then some cottage cheese, and I don't want to eat a bunch of rice, sometimes rice tastes good, but sometimes it's just it's rice. It's not, if I can put cool stuff on it, make it not healthy, it'd be good to, sometimes I don't want to just shovel in rice, so I'll do that quite a bit because two servings of that is 20 grams of protein and 50 grams of carbs. So then I don't have to eat as much meat. If I work out in the morning, then my 6 ounces of chicken now I whittle down to 4 ounces. That's 3 bites, and then I drink a double scoop of that, and I get all my macros.
So I know you talk about intermittent fasting, you're not a fan, but
I don't want to say that.
I know it's really popular right now. You said, so I get it.
I did that with her too. I sound like I'm a.
No, and I'm not saying that. No.
There's health benefits. I typically work with performance athletes, and I don't think it's optimal for them.
Okay, so when I turned 40, I'm obviously later in my 40s. It was first brought up, do you do intermittent fasting? I'm like, no, I work out at 5 a.m. I cannot do it. How am I going to perform well?
That's tough,
Yeah, now I'm later in my 40s, and that's still a conversation that's come up. So I've tried it, and I just feel like on my lower leg days, I'm not performing as well always because of that. So how do you combat both of those things as an older athlete, moving towards 50, and dealing with slower metabolism and all of that with carb cycling?
Oh, the carb cycling or intermittent fasting?
I don't know. Can you do both at the same
Not
time?
if you train in the morning, it's going to be hard. Because you can do intermittent fasting, but to really optimize everything and get the benefits from your workout, your period of eating is going to have to be in the morning.
Right.
It's easy.
Which I had done that, but I felt like I had to shift because my age and everything else that goes along with it.
Well, it's just hard because if you eat all in the morning and then you're done eating at 1 p.m., that's a long afternoon.
Right. So I would do 10 to 7 is what I have been doing, but then I also am not eating for my workout, and I'm starving.
And that's why I don't like intermittent fasting. I guess I don't like it.
I hear what you're saying, so I'm kind of
I'd like to give it some more context. I've been doing this a long time. Do you guys remember the zone diet?
Yeah.
Okay. Everyone was doing the zone, and for 5 years, I had to explain to every client why I wasn't doing the zone diet because they knew it was the best thing ever, and there's no way anything can work unless they do the. Do you guys remember Stop the Insanity? This all felt like I was in the 90s. The ball chick, do you remember? Yeah, no fat. Nothing matters. Just don't eat fat. You can't get fat. And so every client was like, "Well, you're adding fat, so I'll get fat, right?" It's no, that's not how they're. Or, keto or Atkins. Originally it was Atkins. You guys remember Atkins, right?
Yeah.
And then keto. And then
Dan Duchesne.
Yeah. And that's awesome, right? Because you're burning fat, right?
Right.
Yeah, because you're eating fat. You still only burn fat from the body if you eat less calories than you burn. You guys know carnivore, right? Mm-hmm. So here's what I'm saying is, in 10 years, intermittent fasting won't be the fad, and no one will be doing it.
Right. But this has been 10 years. I mean, this is.
It's trailing off. I see it much less. There was probably 5 years ago, it feels like it was when it really peaked, what everyone wanted to do, maybe 3 years ago. So I think we're on the tail end. It's just, and the reason, and I'm not saying it's bad at all, but the reason it's going to have a life cycle is because it doesn't improve things over all these other diets that all have the same end goal, meaning if you want to lose body fat, you have to eat less calories than you're burning.
So
that's one way to do that. Just like the zone was one way to do that. Just like Stop the Insanity was one way to do that. But they all, it's not the diet, it's the fact that there are ways to kind of make it easier to eat less calories than you burn.
So do you think that by your carb cycling, you're basically doing the same thing as intermittent fasting? Because you're still having a period of where you're not eating, right? But it's shortened?
No, I never, my females are usually
that's
spread out
throughout the
evenly.
pre and post workout, cause I used to do that and then I
I don't
switched.
count, and that includes an intro, so really it's like my females are at 5 or 6 meals a day, and my men are at 6 or 7 if you count the intro workout.
Okay.
Yeah, no, and it's spread out evenly, meaning, like, unless you train fasted, if you train fasted, your meal plan will be like, because you really don't train fasted because you'll use an intro.
Right.
And so, no, either way, you eat, my clients eat, like, basically as soon as they wake up, and then their last meal can be literally in bed if they want. And I encourage it to be spread out as much as possible.
Okay.
But mine is different because I'm giving you a calorie amount basically. And so there's no, if you burn 2,000 calories and I'm giving you 1,000 calories, 1,500, I'm gonna start it out there. If I'm giving you burn 2,000 calories and I'm giving you 1,500 calories, we're gonna lose a pound of fat a week. Whether you eat those 1,500 calories spread out or eat them in an intermittent fasting period, you still are 500 calories deficit from the body, you still lose. So but the way I do it, and then, like I do with the high days and stuff, is because it's spread out, you're slightly, very slightly more likely to hold on to some muscle mass that you might have otherwise lost in that fasted period, and more likely to burn a higher percentage of fat than from glycogen because our carbohydrates are spaced out throughout the day. The net calorie difference is the same, but with intermittent fasting, I believe you're like 1 or 2 calories from fat and glycogen might get burned that would, from my way, would be burned from fat.
Okay.
But again, like go back to that 90%, that doesn't matter because there's 3,500 calories in a pound, so
Right.
it's like several years before it would make a difference. But my guys, my bodybuilders that have been doing this for 15 years, that does matter. You know, like a pound of muscle a year over 15 years, 15 pounds of muscle. That's the difference between winning a contest or winning a powerlifting meet and not winning it. But like my mom, when I work with her, I do just straight calorie cycling, and this last time she wanted to do intermittent fasting, but I just give her a calorie count, 3 different calorie amounts, no macros, anything, and then she picked her intermittent fasting, and I think she saw that. She's done this multiple times with me over the years, and the result, like she always wants to try what's popular too.
Yeah.
But then the result is always exactly in line with the calorie count versus how many calories she burns.
Okay.
The other reason calories in versus calorie out can be confusing is food labels, like they only have to be accurate to about 20%. That's really not accurate at all. Like, because it drives me crazy when people will send me their diets and they want to list like I had 14.5 grams of fat in this meal. It's like, you have no idea that. That's like I was an engineer and I was a test engineer, and so we did test cells, and some engineer would have a drawing for like a test stand they'd want built, and they did a calculation in Excel, and they'd want something machined to 10 and then 700 decimal places of an inch. Like, you know, that's like half the size of an atom. Like, it's smaller than the nucleus of an atom. Like, just because Excel can do the math and give you that many decimal places, we can't machine it to that, you know? And it's the same thing, like, just because your chicken says it's 2.5 grams of fat per 3 ounces, doesn't mean that every chicken ever born in history has exactly 2. You know, like, if we ate human meat, we would eat like 85, 15 ground human. The average human is 15% body fat, you know? But that doesn't mean every human is 15% body fat. And food's the same way. So that's why people get really mad at me because I only have them count direct macros. And the reason I do is because my food list, well, like my protein sources will be like top sirloin, round steak, bottom steak, 96.4, 95.4 ground beef, chicken breast, turkey breast, chicken tenderloin, an egg white egg yolk ratio, and like whey isolate. And they'd say like, well, those are all different. Like, doesn't that bother you? I'm like, well, no, because yes, your 96.4 ground beef says it's 4 grams of fat per serving, but you think it's made by a butcher. It's not like in a pharmacy, you know. And if you talk to a butcher, they just take the lean cuts of steak. They don't, you know, they have no way of measuring it, you know. And so it's just as likely you have a cow that was active, and it might only be 2.5 grams of fat per serving, where the label says 4 because in 1996 some company did a bomb telemetry of a bunch of 96.4 gram fat, and that's what the average was. But your chicken might have been really lazy, or a caged chicken, and it might be 4 grams of fat per serving, even though it says 2.5. And so all my food lists, there's like a natural, like a bell curve, and all of mine, the majority, like for the first order, you know, like the 85th percentile, you know, like what's a standard deviation? First standard deviation, like bottom 15 to top 15%. All of mine overlap in that area, which is enough to not really have to count it. Not that you even asked that question.
No.
So one of the things that I found that I've been struggling with is like trying to, I guess, manage appetite levels. Like I'm anywhere usually between 250 and 255. I compete in powerlifting at 275 pounds. I want to get closer to that, but I'll find that like over the course of a month, I'll have, you know, like 2 weeks where I can just eat, everything's good. And then I'll have like another week and a half where it's like I'm forcing myself to work through all the rest of my meals.
This is why I like intermittent fasting, because I thought you were going to say for weight loss, and I'm going to have to eat my words all over again. Because that is the benefit of intermittent fasting, because there are periods of the day where you have a higher appetite and time you have a lower. And if you don't have to eat when you don't have an appetite, there's benefit to that. What we would do in your case is we would use the low days to trigger an appetite. And that's actually, when trying to add size, that's like where people go wrong. Because everyone thinks like, well, I'm hungry now, especially after they get out of the diet, you know. I'm hungry, let's eat. It's like, yeah, you're hungry now, and you know, we'll kill you. Your appetite will, if we just load food up, you'll kill your appetite. And the guy's trying to gain, like, no, I'll force feed, I can do that. It's like, no, I know you say that right now because you're hungry. You'll force feed a meal or a day. You're not gonna force feed for 15 years. No one does, because every time you force feed, the next meal you're even less hungry. And all the people who have the opposite problem right now are like, oh, they're like, oh, what do you mean force feed? But yeah. So what we do is we trigger an appetite. And actually, when you're trying to grow, everything is, I would say, like bodybuilders or powerlifters or any like strength athlete or weightlifters should all invest in the stock market. Because you guys, it's the exact same like why Warren Buffett is rich. Because it's you don't like do anything fancy. You just pick good stocks, good companies, and wait a really long time and go slow. You never like overshoot anything. And like it's the same thing with the diet. What you want to do is when you have an appetite, is eat just under that appetite. It needs to be more calories than you're burning, so you're gaining weight, but you still want to be hungry. And what that'll do is continue to trigger the appetite. And if you work it perfectly, especially if you come out of a fat loss phase, and that's a whole other topic we can get into, but the best way to guarantee the biggest you at some future date is always to diet very, very, very hard right now, even for a long period of time. It sounds counterintuitive, but when you come out of that diet, you have a sky-high appetite. And so we can eat way more than you burn and still be under your appetite. And if we do that, you're hungry all the time and you want more food, and you'll be complaining in your check-ins, Coach, I'm starving, I need more food. And I'll say, I know, but if we satisfy it now, in 2 weeks, you don't have an appetite. Where if your appetite's here, and we keep the food here, they'll grow together. And it's almost unlimited, and that's why you'll see guys, just pound food if they work it properly. But if you already kind of ruined the appetite, the way to get it back is those low days. And what we'll do is we'll take the carbs low, but we'll take the fats low. And if you ever want to trigger an appetite, and that's why low-fat diets suck. I mean, and I say it because my diets are pretty low-fat, but they do suck. But nothing will trigger an appetite harder than very low fats. So on your low day, we'll go lean meats. And lean meats suck. They taste like shit too. So if you're eating nothing but chicken and almost no carbs and no fat, your appetite, that's what we'll do. And so it's a concession that we'll accept that these low days are hypercaloric and we're losing body weight even though we're trying to gain. But by doing that, we're going to trigger enough appetite to get us through the other days. The other way you can trigger an appetite is insulin, and the high days does that also.
Okay.
How would someone improve their insulin sensitivity?
Yeah, no, there's more than that though, but yeah. So suppressor and suppressor max when we finally are able to release it. Cardio, what I like to do, and another counterintuitive thing is the best way to, and also improve insulin sensitivity, one of the best ways to increase appetite and increase your growth long term is cardio. And I have guys do, I call it bodybuilder cardio. We just do 12 minutes typically, like 3 days a week of HIIT, high intensity interval training, but not true HIIT. I'm not asking you to do sprints or run stairs, for 15 seconds. I'm doing, like, what's a high rep set of squats take? Like a minute, high reps set of deadlifts, like roughly, like not exact, but it's around that range, like approximately a minute. So I have people do 1 minute hard, 1 minute light. And it's self-regulating in that you pick how hard you work in the hard minutes, knowing that you need to also be able to recover enough in the next minute to do another hard minute. And that hardness might be, like the level of intensity might drip, but you're only doing 6 hard minutes. And that doesn't burn that many calories. but it dramatically increases appetite. I'm talking to you on your question, so yeah, so it dramatically increases your appetite and increases your insulin sensitivity, and it will improve your strength gains also, because you never have to worry about your lungs being the failure point on any hard multi-compound movement. And the cardio thing, that no one even said this, but in case anyone's thinking, one of my biggest pet peeves in the strength sports is cardio. And like the West Side guys, which cracks me up because it came out of like the triple ply West Side stuff, those guys were cardio junkies. They didn't really do like running, but those dudes trained like crazy intense cardio, barrel ropes, prowler, sled work. And so like all the strongest guys in history like all did all this cardio work. Another example is Ronnie Coleman. If you watch The Cost of Redemption, he's off season, 320 pounds, that 800 pound for 2 squat workout. If you watch the video, he goes back home and like 2 hours later, he does 45 minutes on the step mill in the off season on leg day. But yet every perma-bulker, like 22-year-old meathead that signs with me insists that if they do cardio, they'll lose muscle or lose leg size. And I'm like, Kai Green's got, Ronnie Coleman's got the biggest legs probably ever, like for total size. The dude's doing 45 minutes on the step mill on leg day. I'm asking you to do 6 minutes 3 days a week. But another one, Kai Green, if you guys have ever seen his legs are insane. It looks like he can even walk. He doesn't do any workout until he's done 15 minutes on the step mill. That's step mill, like the hardest cardio. So the 2 biggest legs ever, we're looking at like sprint cyclist legs, like that one Quadzilla you see on the internet every once in a while. Yeah. So I mean, it's just funny to me because if like that's one of those things. If you went to the general public and tried to explain to them, like, yeah, I'm trying to get more muscular, so I'm really worried. I don't want to do any exercise because I'm afraid I won't get muscles. Like that's basically what you're saying. Like the rest of the world's like, wait a minute, you don't want to exercise because it'll make you not have muscle? I don't know, I'm not following. But only perma-bulkers would think that.
Is the only way to see if you're insulin resistant through blood work? Can you go off like symptoms or?
In pretty much blood work. I mean, if you don't have, you could prick your finger like a blood. That's simple for less than that, probably $20. You can get lancets, a glucometer, and test strips.
So what are you looking for, like level wise?
I don't use those. I prefer A1C. A1C is like a long-term track on blood work because people got. Because I used to do a lot of stuff with. I even have a blood sugar book using blood sugar and peak week. I think I'm still selling it. But I stopped doing it because no one understood how it was, and I saw people manipulating it, using it totally wrong. Well, what blood sugar can tell you, because if your blood sugar is elevated and it's acute and you don't have like any diabetic issues, the reason is always related to sodium or water, and so to store glycogen, so muscle glycogen or liver glycogen is glucose combined with water. It's actually 4 to 4.5 times as much water as it is. For every gram of glucose, there's 4 to 4.5 grams of water, and then sodium is the carrier. And so if you get dehydrated or you get low blood sodium, your blood sugar will climb, And so you'll see that. So people are just doing, like people test it, like whether or not they're absorbing carbohydrates. It has almost nothing to do with that. And even more so, like people, like there is no sugar in your blood. Like we measure blood sugar in milligrams per deciliter. The average person has 6 liters of blood in their body. So if you have a blood sugar of 100 milligrams per deciliter over 6 liters, that means you have 6 grams of sugar in your whole bloodstream at 100. So if you do a fast, I'll do a whole other topic. I'll do fasted cardio. Doesn't matter. So if you do unfasted cardio, you have a blood sugar of around 100, which means you have 6 grams of sugar in the blood, right? So which means you have to essentially bring that down a little bit, probably to 4 or 5, or you have to burn like a gram of sugar off, like 4 calories before you really start to kind of more burn fat. It is a little more involved than that. But if you have fasted cardio, and even you have really low blood sugar, so your fasted blood sugar is only 70. That's 4.8 grams of sugar in the blood. So you have 1.2 grams difference. That's 6 calories difference. Less than 1 gram of fat. So there's 3,500 calories in a pound of fat. So technically, if you do fasted cardio and all those 6 calories then can then be burned from fat rather than sugar before you know where you're going, every 2.5 years, if you do cardio 7 days a week, 365 days a year, every 2.5 years you'll burn an extra pound of fat. Every like 8,000 cardio sessions. that's another like forest for the trees thing. It's like, that's another, or 90% thing, you know, like, just do the cardio. People worry like, oh, I wasn't fasting, well, might as well not do cardio, there's no way I can burn fat now. You're like, no, that's like, that doesn't matter at all. I don't even know what the question was. Yeah.
How does your body change as you age, and I'm not talking like 30, 40, 50s, into your 60s, as far as caloric needs and specifically each macro?
Differently than we think, and it does, your metabolism does not slow down as you age. And that's, it's with the caveat, it does slow down, but it does not slow down with anything to do with age. It slows down because people move less as they get older, just through life. You know, like when you're in high school, you're always active. When you have a desk job, you're not active. And partly because of that lack of movement, you lose muscle mass. But for like control for muscle mass and activity, metabolism is constant. And it's because like metabolism isn't anything fancy. It's just the fact that like muscle tissue every pound of muscle requires about 50 calories a day just to be alive. You know, it's just to maintain it, because it's the protein turnover thing again, you know? So it just, and it, you know, it's oxygenated tissue, and so the metabolism like your body doesn't decide what its metabolism is. It's related to how much calories you extract from your food, meaning like gut bacteria will break down some percentage, a small percentage of the food, the calories, and that's relatively unchanged. Your small intestinal length is relatively unchanged. I mean, not relatively, unless you get it so it cut off, it's completely unchanged. And then, so if you like normalize for muscle and energy expenditure, metabolism doesn't change. So that's kind of weird because everyone knows your metabolism slows down as you age, but those are the reasons, because we move less. And so I don't remember exactly the question because I was too excited to.
Your needs for like protein, carbs.
Oh yeah, so they're unchanged unless those things happen. You know, so if you have a desk job, you're going to need less carbohydrates. Well, really you're going to need less calories, but you might as well pull them from carbohydrates because we don't want to pull them from proteins, and the essential fats are required for life, you know, so they're important. So that, and you don't really want to lower protein because you're already going to lose muscle because you're less active, you know. And we think like the only time we can build muscles in the gym, you might still work out, you know, as you age, but your hormones are decreasing and you're less active outside of the gym, and so your muscle mass is going to decrease for that. So you don't want to lower protein unless you have to because you don't want to accelerate that process. But it's really just carbohydrates, you know. I mean, and if you're on exogenous hormones and don't have a desk job and remain as active as you were in high school, then they don't change at all. But that doesn't happen. That is.
What like your carbs? What are your like main sources of carbs?
Anyone wearing our steak rice repeater, chicken rice repeater shirt? Yeah. Yeah, Joe, stand up.
There it is.
Rice.
So basically, rice.
I like rice, and it goes back to like ask the opening question. That is like it's very digestible. There's almost no rice allergy, so really hypoallergenic. You know, it digests very easily. You can change like brown rice has the husk around it, which is more fiber. The husk has no calorie content, but it takes up space. So a cup of brown rice has less calories than white rice. Got more fiber, so it's really like malleable as far as like you can adjust things. I can lower your calories without having to eat any less food volume just by switching you from white to brown rice. Cream of rice is like you can flavor a million different ways. You can make it salty flavored, you can make it sugary flavored, you can make it chocolate flavored. But yeah, rice cakes are easy. That's my, when I say preferred, I don't hate that, but it's hard because like someone asks me that question and then I'll see on the internet like, Justin Rhodes says only eat rice. That's why it's my favorite, you know. But the three pillars I think are rice or rice-based products, potatoes, and then oats. But the reason potatoes aren't my like favorite is because they're very high in potassium, and like hyperkalemia is very dangerous. It's high blood potassium levels. You know, like you go to the store and you buy potassium supplements. They're always 99 milligrams per serving, which is a real small amount. And the reason is because too much potassium can kill you. Well, a medium potato has over 700 milligrams of potassium. And so I've seen that before, people with sky high potassium levels who choose all potatoes for their diet. You know, so you can, and then even worse, people in the strength sports tend to weigh more, tend to have higher blood pressure, which tend to damage the kidneys. The kidneys aren't as good at filtering potassium. And one of the big issues with kidney dysfunction is elevated potassium levels. Because hyperkalemia can lead to, it's a trigger for heart arrhythmias, specifically ventricular tachycardia, which is the one that can trigger, which tachycardia will downgrade to defib, and that's what they do their clear for, clear. So you don't want, and then even worse, like some of the treatments they treat for blood pressure are like potassium-sparing diuretics will lower blood sodium, which will increase potassium percentage concentration. So just in general, that's why I don't really like potatoes. I don't dislike potatoes. Where I don't like potatoes is my primary source, because of the people I work with tend to be at risk for high potassium levels already. And really, like all things considered, oats you could argue would be the best because they're very slow digesting, they're high in soluble fiber, which is very healthy. The fats that are in them are healthy fats, but oats are something that a lot of people have problems digesting.
Yeah, I mean, the difference between steel oats and old-fashioned oats.
If I'm using oats, it's because I never eat them in the off season really. In the off season, I'll even do like the instant packets just because they're quick and taste good. But if I'm eating oats 90% of the time, it's because I'm dieting, and then I do steel cut because it takes longer, more volume, it digests more slowly, and I get that. Like 50 grams of carbs, or even when I'm dieting, I wouldn't get that much, but like the amount of carbs I get when dieting from like those packets of oats would be one packet. The amount of carbs I get from that same amount of carbs from steel oats is like a whole bowl of oats. So I like steel oats for that reason. But it depends, because I like steel oats when I'm dieting, when I'm trying to keep my calories low, if I'm trying to gain size, which I don't really do anymore, but then it would be quicker oats. Yeah, so that's like the thing is everything's got like a caveat, like there's no one. Everything depends on what you're doing, and everyone's got, because half the people in the room are trying to lose body fat, half the people are trying to get stronger, and since I'm a bodybuilder, I can make up my own math, and half the people are trying to get more muscular, so 150%. It's like, so everyone's just got different goals, so everything, it's why it's hard to do these, because I'll give an answer, and even in my head, I have like a specific use case. I'm picturing probably what the person's asking. I'm picturing someone what I think their rough goals are, and so definitely I would take that into consideration also, because I might have said things without realizing that was goal specific.
And then is there such thing as too much protein at once?
Yeah.
Where it becomes harmful?
No, like the kidney stuff. It's hard to say because BUN, like as a kidney marker, blood urea nitrogen. Do you know the only actual clinical measure for anabolism or muscle like hypertrophy is BUN, and low BUN is clinically indicates that you're building muscle. They call it but because we eat high protein diets, BUN is always going to be elevated. And so since BUN is technically a marker of kidney function, it really has it's not involved in the calculation for glomerular filtration rate. So it's weird that it's a kidney marker. But for a long time they said protein was harming your kidneys. But I think I just read a recent study where they even looked all the way to stage 4 renal failure, and they found no correlation with protein intake and future kidney dysfunction. So I'm not a physician, and I didn't do the research study, so I'm not going to tell you that I'm not going to say that, but I'm going to say that's what the study said. There doesn't seem to be.
Similar to the
Your neck is enormous. You train neck?
He's
Brian Urlacher out here.
Thanks. That's fine. So like you were talking about how there's a lot of talk around high protein, you've had your kidneys regard case. I was curious what your thoughts were on. There's again a lot of rhetoric online about red meat versus non-red meat for as a protein source, high cholesterol, correlated with red meat. Okay, so just curious your thoughts.
I'll give I try to answer this a couple different ways. 60 years ago, there was almost no obesity. There was much dramatically lower rates of heart disease, metabolic disorder, type 2 diabetes, and right now more than 50% of Americans, so more than half of us are going to die from obesity-related illness, and pretty much every single one of those we're going to have metabolic syndrome and type 2 diabetes or insulin sensitivity issues. So that's what we're all going to die of. Right? We're all going to die, and that wasn't the case 60 years ago. And we eat dramatically less red meat today than we did then. Back then, back then, like, I think the Brady Bunch movie even made a joke about it. The mom was going to get meat, and one of the new, like, modern moms was like, "You're getting red meat?" And she's like, "Yeah, I got growing kids I need to make healthy meals for," you know? But, no, I don't, it's a tough one because you go with health, you know, like, because there's been some potential increased cancer risks with red meat, but rates of cancer really aren't increasing that like dramatically. It's pretty similar, like percentage-wise, with the population growing with the population, where like obesity is, and oddly enough, red meat consumption does not seem to be correlated with obesity. It seems to be inversely correlated, which should be the opposite. So no, I don't really have like an opinion on that. In that, the people I work with, 99% of them have a performance goal or physique goal in mind, and that's what my focus is. But no, I don't think there's like much worry about this. But there was something else I was going to say about, I can't remember now. But what was your exact question?
How bad is red meat compared to other, protein alternatives, just because there's a lot of talk about cholesterol levels or.
Oh yeah, cholesterol is interesting too, because man, cholesterol is really interesting. I used to work for Beaumont. My first job was I was an exercise physiologist. First job after college, exercise physiologist and nutritionist for a cardiology group at Beaumont, which is one of the top 10 heart hospitals in the world, or country, probably world too. There was a big debate there then between the cardiologists about cholesterol, because the reason, like, what happened was we didn't have like 64 slice MRIs and all this like crazy tools, and so 120 years ago, people would have a heart, they'd die, and they'd get, autopsy, or the coroner would find like a blocked artery, and they knew cholesterol was like this form of fat in the blood and yada yada, and so they just assumed, they made the assumption that, well, it must be this stuff that's building up and causing these heart attacks, and so that was where that started. But no study has ever tightly correlated, even worse, there's some interesting ones out now that show an inverse correlation with cholesterol and heart disease. Meaning, like in double-blind controlled studies, people who lower their cholesterol seem to have an increased risk of heart disease than people who just have high cholesterol. And so I'm partner, and Joe consults with Merrick. I'm partnered with Merrick Health. Their current study is they don't consider high HDL a positive marker. They don't consider it anything. It used to be like you have risk factors, and there's like high LDL is one, this is one, high blood sugar is one, but high HDL knocks one of those off. They stopped doing that, and they don't consider that. They'll treat cholesterol if you need to, but they don't consider LDL treatable, like necessary to be treated until it's over 300. And at that point, because they say that seems to be like a genetic thing, unrelated to the diet or eating habits or activity habits. But the reason, to go back to the cardiologist, you can imagine if you're a doctor, right? And maybe you're pretty sure cholesterol doesn't seem to be correlated to heart disease, but you come in with high cholesterol, two people come in with cholesterol, I give you statin, and you die of a heart attack. No one says anything. You come in with high cholesterol, and I say, you don't need a statin, it doesn't matter, and you die of a heart attack, your family sues me. And so that's kind of where it's at. But it doesn't, like, I wish I had the study name. There's a recent one that showed an inverse correlation, a strong, I think an R score of like 0.6 or something, which is pretty tightly correlated. I mean, you're never going to get higher than like 8 or 9, 0.8 or 9. So it's pretty high, meaning like it was pretty well correlated that the people who treated their cholesterol were at increased risk for heart disease than people who had high cholesterol and left it untreated. But then don't listen to that. I'm not a physician. I don't know. That's a study. It's not me saying that. That was some other people that are telling. But I just don't know. But it's really interesting, yeah, because it doesn't. It seems weird because everyone knows, hey, my cholesterol's high. I got to treat it. But like, what do statins do? Like, one of the problems, like risk is like rhabdomyolysis. Some people get like the DOMs laid on some muscle soreness feeling. Some people get that from statins. So people have really pretty bad reactions to statins. And so certainly you have to, at least in those cases, wonder, like, is it worth it then if these studies show either no correlation, minimal correlation, or in some cases anti-correlation, and there's these negative effects to it. But I just don't know. I'm on a statin, actually. I've had high cholesterol, like, my whole life. I take a statin. Sometimes I forget. But just because I just don't know. And, yeah.
I'm kind of backing you up on that. So typically your cholesterol is just like your body uses your cholesterol and turns it into certain hormones.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really nothing bad. It's just like your body's not utilizing your hormones correctly. So it's just going to be
That's actually, yeah, and that's actually, you can correlate that with like plummeting testosterone levels, because I can't remember the exact, is it cholesterol converts to DHEA, which converts to androstenedione, which converts to testosterone. So cholesterol is one of the precursors for testosterone, and testosterone levels have plummeted around the same time, starting around the same time we insisted on treating cholesterol. So Merrick Health exists as an HRT clinic, that like there's this whole line of there's this whole medical industry that might not exist had this weird correlation between cholesterol and heart disease not been like, treated or whatever. Yeah, so it's kind of interesting. But yeah, I mean, yeah, because like when I was at the first time I learned to read blood work, like in a class, I don't remember the lower end of normal, but I remember the upper end of normal for testosterone was 1,050. Was it nanograms per deciliter? Maybe it's nanograms. It was 1,050. Because I remember it was over 1,000. I don't remember if we got tests or not, but I remember that. You never see that anymore. They don't. I think they show like 900 as the actual.
60 or something.
Yeah. And so, I wondered, and I looked it up one time, and when I Google Scholar, and I was trying to find over the years, and I found another one that showed 1,150 that was like older from like the 60s or 70s. And so now even if you get on like TRT, they won't let you get over 1,000. Where you used to just walk around that way. Like our grandpas are out there just like hairy backs and yeah.
I just kind of want to add something to that about the testosterone. In the 1950s, the average male testosterone was over 1,500.
Yeah, it's insane. They wouldn't even let you get that high now, even on testosterone.
The test only stops at 1,500 now.
Yeah. If it's over that, it just says greater than. Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, it's weird. We just know so little about the body. Like even we know what we know, but it's like I mean, we obviously don't know anything because people still get diseases and die from them. All of us, So it's like we think we know so much, and we know compared to like the 1840s or but like we find out stuff all the time that we learn it was wrong, and things change. It's like I'm trying to think of some of the dumb things we did for heart disease that way they've changed, how they've treated diabetes, and so who knows, we could be just, it certainly seems like we're probably screwing ourselves up. All these, sometimes when you hear all these new, increased rates of all these diseases, and it's like, well, those are all things we treat that we didn't used to preventatively treat. Maybe, are we really just doing everything wrong? But I mean, all you can do is, trust the researchers. Well, you don't trust them, but all you can do is do the research and gather data. But it sure seems like we're not very good at it.
And there's a lot of things coming out about testosterone and soy-based products.
Yeah,
I've been hearing a lot about that as well.
Soy is, I'm not an expert on this. So, soy has phytoestrogens, which appear to be able to. I think they're similar enough to the estrogen receptor that they can fit in the estrogen receptor, which doesn't necessarily mean anything because one anti-estrogen, tamoxifen, does that. Tamoxifen fits the estrogen receptor very well. It just doesn't activate it. It fits in and blocks it. So these phytoestrogens, if they did that, it would be an anti-estrogen, but it doesn't seem that they do that. Another thing with testosterone, sorry, going on a rant or tangent here, but it's related to body fat also. That was the other thing. Men produce the highest rates of testosterone between about 8 to 12% body fat. And I hate giving the body fat percentage because 20 years ago, if someone had a single ad where it was like, I have 6% body fat, and anyone who had a six-pack was 30% body fat. Where now guys are guy of low body fat and be like, yeah, he was about 30% body fat. But these were studies that were done a long time ago with skin, either 8 or 11 or 14 point skin caliper testing. So I'm talking 8 to 12% on skin caliper, where the way I try to think of it is at that 12% range. Have you ever been lean enough where whether you're holding water or not from one day, how well you can see your abs? If you can see that, you're in that range. If you can't tell that, you're above that range. And what happens is, above that range, your body produces less testosterone, but worse, it increases the amount of the testosterone that gets aromatized to estrogen. So you produce less testosterone, and you aromatize more of those stuff you actually do produce to estrogen. And a way to think about this is, everyone can picture back to in your 20s or something, you have I don't know how PC I can do, like a fat buddy, but he's obviously gone through puberty, they're mid-20s, Not that guy, he's but and like you can picture your buddy, like he didn't have a real full beard, you know, like the term neck beard. You know, they had like not very thick beard, like almost no chest hair, you know, and they kind of had boobs, man boobs. And that's probably why, because during their peak testosterone production adolescent years, going through puberty, they were a really high body fat, so they weren't producing as much testosterone, and what they were producing was getting converted to estrogen. You know, and so I think that's correlated also. Like everything we're doing, like we're lowering cholesterol, not eating, you know, saturated fats, because saturated fat, like arachidonic acid and omega-6 fatty acid, is actually a trigger for muscle protein synthesis. So like if you really look at things, you can like just change the angle we look at things from one way. It's like we do all these things to lower cholesterol. We try to avoid omega-6 fatty acids. Our body fats are higher. Well, of course our testosterone, like everyone's like, why are testosterone levels plummeting? It's like, well, because we're doing everything possible to cause that, you know? We're carrying too much body fat, we're not eating the foods that raise testosterone, and we're treating the things that directly is a direct we're lowering the thing that is a direct precursor to testosterone.
So I guess with that, aside from like lowering body fat, what are good or reliable ways to naturally increase like testosterone levels?
Steroids. There's not much. That's the problem. It's weird, and like it seems like
over-the-counter test.
It seems like aggressive things. You know, this is a fine because head trauma will lower testosterone, but it seems like aggressive activity, sports like high intensity sports. And I don't know if anyone knows a direct pathway for that, other than I've seen like where they show that like kids who participate in like intense sporting activities during adolescence tend to have higher testosterone levels. Now, you know, causation doesn't equal correlation, so it could be that kids with higher testosterone levels want to play football, want to play basketball, but that seems like one way. And that's another thing we don't do. We don't have like, we don't. You know, like, well, none of us are out there slinging a sword in a sword fight anymore, so, you know, no one fights anymore, you know? Like, when I was a kid, there were fights, like, my kids have never seen a fight at school, like a punch thrown at school. It's, like, they just, which is good, I mean, I guess, you know, like the poor boys. When my kids, I asked them one time, like, that happened all the time, you know? And actually, one of my best friends, Andy Matthews, none of this would be legal anymore, but I moved to a new school, this is like in the 80s, in 5th grade, I moved to a new school, and like, 80s had some weird styles, and the school I moved from was in Cape Back, Michigan. I don't know if you guys know where that is. They have to spell it the same way backwards and frontwards, because otherwise people would forget. It's one of those ones you can drive through it neutral, you know? But, so we were always probably late on the fashion, and there, like I remember the cool thing was kids were wearing ties loose, like a loose tie. And so I moved to Port Huron, which is a bigger school, and they probably had all the modern stuff. And I walked into school first day with a loose tie, and this kid had Andy Matthews. The first kid I saw goes, "Hey fag, why the tie?" And so I punched him, and we got in a fight, and then we were like best friends after, you know? But like all those things would not happen anymore. You couldn't call a kid fag, you couldn't punch him, you certainly wouldn't be friends afterwards. But yeah, I just think that's crazy. Not like there was fights all the time, but like when you were like, especially like when you're like a 5th grade kid, and you didn't know, like, because the fighting was like when by the time you're senior in high school, a fight's a big deal. You can kill someone, but when you're 5, you don't know how to control your emotions. You don't know how to talk things through. But I think it's almost bad because kids, they don't ever do that. They don't know how to like work through conflict. But I thought that was interesting because my kids had never seen a punch thrown in real life. Sorry, that was not.
I can't make a slide for that fast. Sorry.
More or less, there's not many like conclusive ways.
Yeah, there really isn't. I mean, yeah, probably eat more cholesterol, eat like red meat, do all the things you're not supposed to do.
Right.
Fight all your buddies, and then especially take testosterone.
Kind of what I think he was saying earlier. Is there a point, like amount of protein per meal, it's like a good number to try to shoot for, and then above it, you're just kind of spinning your wheels?
Yeah. I don't know. That's a really good question because I see it all the time. Like the most protein you can eat in a meal or assimilate in a meal is 35 grams. That you can't do 35 grams because we know even 3 grams a day basically maxes out muscle growth. So I don't know what it is. There's no number. You have to define what you mean because there's no number you can't absorb. If it was, then getting ripped would be really easy. Just eat a bunch of protein and it wouldn't matter after 35 grams a meal or whatever. But no one knows. but there's certainly a number that you can utilize for what you want the protein to be used for, which is muscle protein synthesis, and it's probably much lower than any of us are eating per meal. So it's a terrible answer, there is no answer, but I just try to spread the protein out as much as possible. Ideally, you want to like slow trickle protein all day. Like as a general rule, don't do this because none of this really matters, like that 90% rule. But as a general rule, you want your protein nice and steady during the day. You want your fats nice and steady during the day, except for periods when you have really high carbohydrates, and you want most of your carbohydrates around training.
Okay.
That's kind of the rough outline.
And then what are your thoughts on casein protein?
Better than whey, actually.
Better than whey?
Yeah, it tastes terrible though.
That's horrible.
Yeah, I used to, when I cared, I would do casein because all I cared about was what was the best. And if I did have a protein powder, but I don't care enough now. Sometimes I'll do a mix, but yeah, it's probably better. It digests more slowly.
Yeah, it touches base on what you were saying with protein throughout the.
Yeah, no, when I was a competitive bodybuilder and all that stuff did matter to me. Casein. I do sometimes the casein whey mix just so it tasted a little better, but I always had casein in it to slow the digestion. No physics questions? No one ever wants to ask me this stuff.
String theory.
String theory. What about aliens? But I say physics, my master's isn't physics, so that's why I do all the thermodynamic talk and stuff. But I'll do the alien thing actually. One of the interesting things I think, about the aliens is like aliens.
Tried to warn you guys.
It's almost impossible that there isn't intelligent life. You go to Sleepy Bear Dunes or something, or any beach, and all those grains of sand. There are more stars in the universe than there are grains of sand on Earth. You know, so think about that. And each of those stars potentially has a planet around it. You know, there's 400 million stars in our galaxy, and there's as many as 1 trillion galaxies in the observable universe, which is only potentially a small percentage of the full universe, which is only potentially one of as many as an infinite number of universes. Like in physical law, the many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics is completely physically valid, meaning that everything that can happen happens always, and we just have we live in this one timeline of this part that's happening, but every possible outcome always happens, and that would be like an infinite universes. But the thing with aliens is, we picture aliens traveling from somewhere else, right? And there almost certainly are aliens out there. But the nearest galaxy is 4 million light years away. So, and anything that has mass can't travel at the speed of light. That's one of the important constants of the universe. If you have no mass, you can only travel at the speed of light, and that's what the definition is. It's the speed of light. Anything without mass, and the only thing that doesn't have mass is light. And anything with mass can never travel at the speed of light, because if you solve the equations of energy, the full equations of energy, it starts with E equals mc squared plus 1/2 mv squared, and it's a Taylor expansion that goes on for infinity. It would take an infinite amount of energy to get to that speed, so you can't do it. But even if we could travel at the speed of light, it would take 4 million years to get to the nearest galaxy. So aliens traveling from other planets actually violates all our known laws of physics. One thing that doesn't violate the known laws of physics would be aliens coming from other universes, which I think is really weird. And even more weird is that would happen. It would need to happen. So gravity doesn't make sense. It seems weird because gravity is the most powerful force we feel all the time, but it's not. A single magnet can lift a paperclip and overpower the gravity of the entire Earth. You know? So electromagnetism is 10 to the 42 times more powerful than gravity. What does 10 to the 42 mean? There's only 10 to the 40 protons in the entire universe. There's less than there's less than 10 to the 40 atoms then in the whole universe. And gravity is 10 to the 42 or something like that, weaker than electromagnetic force. That's how weak it is. And so one of the theories that seems plausible is that gravity is a leaked force from another universe, and somehow it's leaked through, which would then also make sense because black holes lead to the singularity that doesn't really make sense the way we understand things. And that's the whole thing of a science fiction thing that really isn't from science fiction, it comes from science, is that do black holes then correlate to traveling somewhere else, or does it loop back through to other places in our universe? We don't know, and we can never know other than what the math says, which says that's possible. And yeah, so that's like, so, and back to the quantum tunneling, and so, well, what, or not back to it, start. So like that's one potential thing is that gravity is leaking through, and so the way these like spaceships seem to move, if they're real, which Congress says they are now apparently, is that they seem to move in a way that would require like moving warping gravity, which would mean that they're not moving. That means they're moving things, you know, like they're just sitting there like in a chair, you know, like at your house, like playing a video game, and the world moves around you, so they're not moving at all. But one thing that would also be plausible that doesn't violate the laws of physics is quantum tunneling, and actually that's the way our sun works. And so like electromagnetic forces mean like when atoms come together, like the reason I'm sitting on this chair, I'm not actually sitting on this chair, all these electromagnetic forces are keeping us from not falling through each other, because we're all mostly empty space. And so in the sun, atoms, like the hydrogen atoms and stuff are all moving around slamming into each other, but the electromagnetic forces push them away before they can actually get close enough to fuse their nucleuses. They don't have enough heat to fuse nuclei, but the sun is powered by nuclear fusion, meaning they are fusion. But what happens is they tunnel, it's called quantum tunneling. They at any given point, anything, like any atom can be anywhere in the universe. It's a curve, like a bell curve. It's most likely where you think it would be, but that's part of quantum mechanics is their wave function. There's some potential for that atom to be anywhere in the universe, and so what happens is that every like 1 in like 10 quadrillion collisions, that other atom just like tunnels and appears inside the other atom, which creates fusion, which is how the sun works. So not only does it work mathematically and on paper, but we've created fusion bonds, and we know that's how the sun works. And so one thing that seems absurdly ridiculous, but actually is more physically valid than aliens traveling from other galaxies, would be aliens living in some other universe and like tunneling into ours. Which it also makes sense for why they crash all the time, because how many people have you been on an airplane, on one of our shitty airplanes that's crashed? None. So like first order approximation, planes do not crash ever on Earth, but somehow these like aliens crash all the time. Which would make more sense if they just accidentally tunneled into our universe and go, oh, what the hell's going on?
So given your excitement about quantum tunneling, I'm assuming that you're probably a big fan of Dune, given that's how they travel.
Oh, is it? No, I wish.
Navigators, that's how they travel.
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, it's like I was telling my wife about this. I was like, I don't want to I don't get to talk about it. No one likes this stuff. But I bitch all the time. I went to this whole grad school for physics, and I learned all these, like as I did a lot of mathematical physics, I knew all these like really cool mathematical concepts that I never get to talk to anyone about. But I just think it's really interesting.
Besides me on the podcast.
So I just think it's really interesting. We picture these aliens traveling from other, galaxies, and that seems to make sense because that's the only way we know how to travel is through space. But that's way less physically valid as far as our understanding of the universe. That would mean that there's a whole list of physics that we don't understand, which seems confusing because we describe the universe very well. So we must understand a good chunk of it. If they're traveling from other galaxies, it basically means we don't understand anything. Or we say we do understand things, and it just so happens that what seems really weird because we don't travel that way is like that, like the quantum tunneling.
So yeah, the gist of it is a navigator in Dune just does a bunch of math and proves that the ship isn't where it's supposed to be, and they just appear someplace else.
That's basically how it works, yeah.
But given the fact that we can't travel faster than normally travel at or faster than the speed of light, and the fact that clearly aliens do exist, how do you rationalize that against the Fermi paradox?
Which Fermi? Why are they everywhere?
Well, more like the idea of like the great filter.
There's a bunch of weird things because like is the universe infinite? No. Is the universe infinite? If it's infinite, then there's an infinite number of stars. Sure. So why isn't the sky infinitely bright? So there's so many weird paradoxes, and like I think the Fermi paradox is basically like if there's aliens, why if they're everywhere?
Why haven't we seen them?
Yeah, and it's if they have I would say then if they're traveling from other galaxies, we couldn't see them because like say we knew in the Andromeda galaxy, that's the nearest galaxy of billions of galaxies, potentially trillions. The nearest one, if we knew the Andromeda galaxy had aliens, we would have to, humans have been around for 100,000 years, we'd have to send out on a spaceship, and even at our fastest spaceship, it would take like several 100 million years to reach there. How would we ever, we couldn't do it. You know, so I, like, that's my thought on the Fermi paradox would be like, as far as we're viewing it, like they're coming from other they just can't get here unless they change physics. They'd have, because you can't travel faster through space than the speed of light. This is stupid. You guys don't like this, do you? Maybe it comes to you. But you can't travel through space faster than the speed of light. And you can travel faster than the speed of light relativistically, and things do that because the universe is expanding, and there are parts far, like at the edge of the universe, where space is expanding so much that they're, as far as we can, their distance from us, from the way we interpret it, is happening faster than the speed of light, even though they're not traveling through space. It's just that new space is being created. So I don't remember what's going on. Oh yeah, so, so there could be, like, they would have to be able to create that somehow, like through a wormhole, or, which I think then doesn't really violate that, because they would have, it seems like there would have to be a lot of aliens for enough of them to have the technology to figure out how to, like, warp space.
Full space.
Yeah, which is how our current understanding, or there's physics we don't understand, but yeah, or they're from other universes and they just accidentally climb a tunnel into ours and crash. No, I don't believe no one ever mentioned this.
I'm a flat earther, so. This is a non-alien question. I was curious what your opinion is on sucralose.
Oh, thanks. Did you guys read that sucralose study? It's pissed me off so much. Because we use sucralose in our products because it's the safest artificial sweetener. So sucralose was produced before GRAS, not before GRAS, but GRAS, generally recognized as safe. So in the 2000s, it was so hard to bring new things into the market. And of course, like if you're a major food corporation or pharmacy, you got a lot of money, and so you can tell the government to make it easier to put stuff to, you know. But it used to be really difficult to bring new products. And so sucralose was pre-GRAS, meaning they had to really prove its safety very strongly, dramatically more strongly than they do it now. And it passed all that. And even worse, like all my clients who now are trying to avoid sucralose because of this stupid study that they don't know how to interpret, want to use stevia, which stevia is not even legal in half the world. But the erythritol is like terrible. So it's like, even with how easy it is to bring stuff to market now, we won't approve erythritol. Stevia is a specific type that they'll kind of approve, and half the world won't approve it. So that is very unhealthy. But sucralose, they did testing in vitro. They said it was genotoxic, and it, like, which is really bad because geno means genes, it means alters your DNA, you know. But like glutamate, an amino acid, is genotoxic, not even in vitro. You know what else is genotoxic in vitro? Sucrose, sugar. so it's silly because most things are genotoxic in vitro, meaning in the cell. And so the amount of sucralose they tested would be like, if our height was, I looked it up even more precisely, it's about 1,000 gallons of our highest sucralose product. But not only would you have to drink 1,000 gallons all at once, you'd have to inject 1,000 gallons directly into a cell, which is pretty impossible because that's 1,000 gallons is a lot of volume. That's a big syringe. But yeah, no, that's my problem. Is it just pisses me off because the aspartame would do the same thing. Everyone was like afraid of aspartame for a while. Aspartame is 2 amino acids, one of which is phenylalanine, which is a precursor for L-tyrosine. How many people have taken an L-tyrosine supplement? Like, yeah, that's aspartame. So, you know, so people were worried about that. Now no one's worried about aspartame because they moved to the new thing. But even worse, it's pissing me off so much. You can be worried about those things, but to be worried about sucralose and then move to stevia, which actually does suck, it's because people can't read studies and or don't read studies. And I don't blame people for not reading because research studies are terrible. It's like, you know, like the worst writing. It's so like no one can talk in real English. They have to like use stupid words. I hate reading them. But I would recommend everyone learn to read research studies, and it's really not that hard. One of the difficult things they do is they do everything like milligrams per kilogram, like the dosing, you know, which seems like, oh, so it's like 3.6 milligrams per kilogram. Oh God, I don't got a calculator. You can do pretty close estimation as most men are around 100 kilograms. Not exactly, you know, that's 220 pounds. So, but around, you know, like a rough number. So if you see 3.6 milligrams per kilogram, and most women are like around 50, same thing, not really, but in that range. So if you see 3.6 milligrams per kilogram, that's about 360 milligrams for men and about 180 milligrams for women. And so that cuts that out. So now when those numbers, now just multiply whatever that is by 100 for men and multiply by 50 for women. And then those numbers make sense. So the way research studies will start is they have like the introduction, you know, and you kind of get the gist of it. And that gives you kind of the idea of what they're expecting, what they're testing for. And then you can kind of scroll through all the crappy words where they set up their experiment. You don't need any of that information. And go where you see those milligrams per kilogram. And if you're a dude, multiply all those numbers by 100, and those are the doses they're giving people. And then you know that, so you say 250, or you know, if it's 2.5 or 5, then you know it's 250 milligrams, 500 milligrams. Those are the doses. And then go to the graph, and then you can see the graphs, and also have those same milligrams per kilogram, which you then just multiply by 100. Now the graphs make sense, and then you jump to the conclusion. And so you can skip the stuff before the graphs, after the graphs, and then read the introduction, the numbers, the graph, and the conclusion. Takes you like 2 minutes, and you get the gist of the studies. And if you read that study, what you would get is that you have to inject 1,000 gallons directly into the cell, and all you get at the end is the exact same thing that happens with sucrose itself. You know, and even like I said, even worse, like glutamate. Some amino acids are genotoxic, not even in vitro, just in real life. You know, it's the fact that like genotoxic seems like a bad word because, you know, alters your genetics, but it's a terrible study. It's not a terrible study. It's terrible how it was presented because because there's zero risk. Nothing's zero risk, but it's the safest artificial sweetener by far. You know, and oddly enough, aspartame is probably the next safest. And the worst is stevia.
Yeah, I just went through a whole class with my girlfriend. She's diabetic now.
Okay.
And
type 2 or type 2?
It's like 1.5.
Okay, my daughter's type 1.
Since
Corona came out. Yeah, my brother-in-law got type 1 from getting COVID.
Yeah, because she took the shot, and 3 months later, I'm like, baby, you lost a lot of weight. She goes, really? And all of a sudden, she started peeing all the time. She went in there, and I'm like, well, you're not 1, because now it'll come up inconclusive.
Yeah.
But she's not 2. So now they have a whole new branch, it's called 1.5.
Yeah.
And that's what they told us was stevia was the safest.
Yeah, really good. Yeah, well, go.
That was at Beaumont.
Oh, well, I knew some of the RDs there. Right. The other problem, and this is like not to be like a snob or a dick, but one of the other problems is like with nutrition and stuff is the people who are doing it clinically, like RDs, dietitians and stuff. It's not their passion. That was just a degree for them, and it's not. It's like I was an exercise physiologist, and not like it's a bad degree, but I had no business prescribing anything to do with exercise based on my degree. You know, all my real knowledge comes from being personally interested in it. And RDs are kind of the same way. Like what you learn as a dietitian is you learn things like nothing to improve performance or like to optimize things. You learn that like you need 70 milligrams of vitamin C on average per day. If you're a smoker, you need like 100 milligrams a day. You learn stuff like that, which is not, you know, so they it's not like they don't know anything, but the things they know are really applicable to most of what we're trying to do. And even worse, it's their job, it's not their passion, you know. So it's a weird thing, but yeah, they would say something like that. But if you go to Europe and tell me you want stevia, we can't. That's illegal here. You mean stevia? Are you trying to kill yourself? Yeah, God, why do they say that? That's pissing me off. Yeah, I mean, you can use. It's not like any of them are healthy. You know, it's still artificial. But half of us die of obesity, and pretty much all of us that die of obesity will have insulin resistance in that time directly from too much sugar. So. 50% chance of death or genotoxic if you inject 1,000 gallons directly into the cell. I'll take that. I'll take my risk there.
Want to wrap on that?
Yeah, sorry for going on so long.
Thank you. All right, well, this because I always do that when like someone asks a question and I'm not paint it like, oh, that's so stupid. But I'm not saying like, I just know some people like look at it like, oh, why are you trying to treat me so shitty? It's like a dramatic effect. I'm terrible. I just feel bad after. Just Ace's drama classes.
That was my minor, yeah. Interpretive dance.
No,
I had to
I-
take an interpretive dance. I went to a liberal arts college, so I had to take an interpretive dance class. I danced to Celia by Simon Garfunkel.